Welcome back, everybody, to Chatting with Nuts. This is episode number 90, which means that there's only 10 left until we hit the big 100. And tonight I am joined by my good friend, Dr. Philip Chase, the person I always reach out to whenever I'm like, I kind of want a night off on Chatting with Nuts. I want something that's going to have plenty to say, that plenty of people adore. And that's always you, my friend. Always.
Oh, wow. I don't know what to say.
Say thank you, Philip. That's what a normal person would do. They'd say, thank you, Jimmy. You're so gracious, kind, charming, good looking, that type of thing.
Oh, that. Yes, of course.
Yes.
That almost goes without saying, but of course, yes. And I'm actually pretty excited to be here for episode 90. This is, I think, widely recognized as the premier talk show on BookTube. I think we all acknowledge that some of us have, attempted to do something like this, but we all fall short of Chatting with Nuts. And that is largely due to your industry and your talent. And is that enough, Jimmy, or should I keep going?
No, this is good. I like it. I appreciate it very much. Everyone has to pay the toll, which is to boost my confidence, because there's enough self-loathing over here to last me many, many decades. So I have to get it where I'm coming from. Did you notice that my backlights, instead of being the purple that everyone has, I've switched them to ice and fire?
I like it.
A little ice and fire. I thought it was appropriate.
Very appropriate. Song of Ice and Fire. And just reading. See it, mayhaps. There's a bit in One Piece also that it's, I don't know if you've kept reading or not, but it's a little further than when we last talked. But there's an island in One Piece that is actually relevant to the fire and ice thing too. So, yeah.
Are you trying to entice me to continue reading? Is that what we're doing?
I might be.
You did say this was so fun talking with you and Alan. Could you please continue reading?
Of course, there's only one answer to that question, Alan, which is obviously BookTube Jeopardy
is the premier game show for sure.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. There's not even, where's the competition anyway?
RJ reads, or RJ tries to read, which is one of the best channel names out there. He actually does Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it is very entertaining. I highly recommend it. But Alan has had the grip on that Emmy for a long time for best live book award, well, not award, but game show. For a very long time, for a very, very long time. 90, Philip. We're on episode 90. We're feeling good on a Friday night. It's been about 3 weeks since I've been on. Been a tumultuous time in my professional life. So I'm kind of feeling good to be around, people that I tend to love to talk to, but also just enjoy seeing everyone here tonight on a Friday. 90. How many episodes of Dear Dr. Fantasy do you have?
68, I think, at the moment. So I'm far behind you in more than one respect. But in terms of just the episode numbers, I am lagging considerably. But that's okay. I mean, I don't aspire. I know my limitations, but I have a goal. I don't know what yours is, but my goal is to do 300 episodes of DDF.
Why 300?
I don't know. I just there was a number that came in my head when I started doing it, and I thought I'd roll with it. But and I'll have to live a lot longer for that to actually happen.
Well, so. We certainly hope. I mean, okay, so it's taking you how many years? 5 years to hit 60, so times 5. So
yeah.
So you got what, like 16 years left?
Math for me, Jimmy. That's too much math.
I forgot.
But I'll only be like 70 years old when that happens. So who knows what Dr. Fantasy will be like as a 70-year-old.
I imagine still pretty jolly, maybe a little bit more forgetful, which will make me feel better because you seem to recall things so well. It'll let the rest of us kind of catch up, I think, if you start to slip just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you never know. There are certain things that I do forget all the time, like what day it is, but I can remember the name of a character in a story. I usually forget what year it is. Heck, forget about the day. But there are certain things that you do remember. So lovely people in the chat here.
Oh yeah, we got all the usual suspects plus some new faces, which is great. We also love to see Gavin, as always, says 90 episodes, but how many seasons? It's ironic that you say that, Gavin, because I've long thought about doing seasons on the channel, but it doesn't really work for the way YouTube goes, right? Like, and just the kind of the way I've ran this channel for a long time, it really would not work. So I would have to restructure a lot of things to make that type of thing. But I've always loved the idea of seasons. Like Alan has seasons on Jeopardy, which I think is pretty cool. But even like reading themed seasons would be kind of interesting, tied into certain conversations. Like I always thought that would be a cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always innovating. That is one of the reasons why Chatting with Nuts is the premier talk show, is the constant tweaking and innovating and leading the way.
Dumping money into equipment. I'm trying to bury you all with my wallet. Like that is my goal. Is I just want to crush you with economics. That's
snazzy special effects, which I can't do. I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing with the tech stuff. So.
It's because of people like Shelf Unstable giving us a $4.20 super chat. Thank you very much, Amanda. It's very kind of you. And for folks who do not know, Shelf Unstable is the home of some great writing sprints during the week, usually on Wednesday and Thursday. I've been joining those and writing alongside of her. Her author name, of course, is Anya Dillon. And there's other people joining all the time over there. So if you need a kick in the pants to get to working on your writing project, those sprints are a really good opportunity for that. And I would encourage everyone to go check that out for sure. Philip, you said you're not close to me, but you didn't start doing Dr. Fantasy until what, year 2 or 3, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it was at least 2 years, maybe more, before I actually started doing the DDF. So yeah, it wasn't something I started right away with the channel. It was just me copying my betters, at a certain point.
Well, I think in that case, your pace is pretty remarkable, and you're catching up. I felt like I've been close to 100 for a long time, but now it's finally here. I feel like I really need to start making plans, because I keep saying, episode 100 will be a big deal. It'll be this or that, but I'm not actually totally positive on what I have some ideas, but like,
of course you can't say what they are, but we're all curious, I think, about who the guests, plural, maybe might be for episode 100. Who knows? But it should be something super special, I'm sure, whatever it's going to be. And it'll be a celebration. Does anyone else have? Okay, so I'm at 68. How many does Joanna have on Why Read? And how many, is anybody even close to 100 besides you?
I mean, there's tons of people who do live shows, so I guarantee you there is someone out there who has 100 shows. I think Britain might actually have 100. I think.
Oh yeah, Britain probably has. Yeah.
Alan is putting out his bid to be on episode 100. I don't know if I can swing it.
That would be the popular vote, I think.
I think this is the longest it's been since. Actually, you have been since last time you were on the channel, which was about 5 months ago. Alan has not been on.
What?
So this is the first time that you've actually done a double appearance before Alan came back on.
I'm catching up to Alan? Wow.
Oh, you got to be at least second place. It's either you or Joanna, if I had to guess. Yeah, Britain says 104 so far. 104.
There it is. So Britain, as far as we know, has the record. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll end it at 100. Maybe I'll just...
What?
Maybe that'll be it. That would be nice.
No.
Get my Fridays back? Bro, that'd be sick.
Oh, no. Come on. You don't need your Fridays. What do you need Fridays for?
I don't know. Golfing...
I knew that golfing was the first thing that was going to come out of your mouth. I knew that.
Alan is beside the fact that this is actually a true statistic that he has not been on since the last time that you've been on. And Jimmy, he said, Jimmy, why have I not been on? The reason why, Alan, is because you didn't notice. That's the problem. You never noticed.
To be fair, Alan has been somewhat busy, I guess.
Delete your channel at 100. If I ever do delete my channel, I promise you all that I will do it on a live stream, because I don't know what happens if you click delete while you're live. Like, what happens? Does it just end the stream? Like, it would be such a fun experiment.
Just unplug the entire internet at episode 100.
That should be it. I think that would actually be pretty stellar. But hey, you know what? There's a lot of time for the future. Right now, I'm in the here and now with you, my good friend Philip, and I'm kind of curious what you're reading right now. What do you got on the docket?
I am reading right now this thing. It's
the most uplifting book I've certainly ever read.
Jimmy, I gotta tell you, this thing is so depressing. It is so depressing. I thought I knew what bleak was from the earlier books in the series, but this is wallowing in the muck and the putrescence of humanity in a way that I've never seen in my entire life. I've never seen anything like this, and I gotta tell you, it's a little trying at times.
It's rough. Wait till you get to the end. Wait till you...
I mean, I was calling out this absurd hope that maybe Bakker would surprise me with a happy ending or something. But I don't. No. Okay, well,
it is a crazy ending. It is a crazy ending, and I'm going to let you know.
Crazy, I expect.
You're brilliant, so you'll get it at the first time. But I had to watch like 2 videos from our good friend Slowly Read, and then I had to go and like read blog posts to kind of understand everything that had happened, because this man was operating on such a subtle level all throughout the sequels that I totally missed a through line that will become very obvious after you finish it's crazy. It is insane.
Wow. Yeah. No, he's brilliant. I will always admit that Bakker is just prodigiously talented. He is amazing on the level of the prose, on the level of the imagination, and so many things. But Jimmy, there is an imbalance in this book, and particularly in the last 2 books. Okay, I will say that the first 2 books of Aspect Emperor were my favorite thing by Bakker. I loved The Judging Eye and the Whitelock Warrior. I thought those 2 books were just fantastic. And something happened with The Great Ordeal. It was a great ordeal. It was really, it was the slog of slogs. But this thing, ooh, my goodness, this thing. And I'm a little over a quarter of the way through, and I'm like, oh, when can this end? Because this is just so monotonously bleak. No weeping on the slog.
No weeping on the slog. I was going to say it, but Amanda filled the blank space for me. I mean, so do you know the story behind the last 2 books? Has anyone ever told you?
I mean, I have an idea, but please fill us all in, because I think that Bakker's had issues with the publication of the books and
editors. So basically, books 3 and 4 are largely unedited, and I believe the Unholy Consult is just like straight up unedited at times. And to be fair, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's actually a decent amount of grammatical errors in the final book. I didn't really notice them because I'm dumb, but my friend Ben, who read it, was like, yeah, like this was clearly not edited. But that also meant that you got completely unfiltered, unhinged R. Scott Bakker, like no developmental edit, like just like...
Yeah, that's the issue. Yeah, I feel like he is just so brilliant at portraying the absolute, limits of human depravity. And the problem with that is if you just lean into that and with no constraints, it actually gets monotonous. As brilliant as he is, I'm actually kind of bored at this point. I'm actually bored.
Philip,
I'm sorry.
What are you doing?
There is nothing more that he can do to gross me out. And by the way, I am really, really glad that I'm a vegetarian. If I had not been a vegetarian before reading this book, I would be now.
Tender in the flesh could never do what this book has done to Philip. But hold on, what do you mean boring? What do you want him to do? Describe trees for 7 pages like Tolkien? Do you want him to...
Anything, okay? Anything except for the muck and the putrescence. Anything.
Oh, look at those trees. Those are green. Oh, wow. Bark. Look at the bark, Philip. 7 pages of the end.
I just want something happy, Jimmy. I just want somebody to be nice.
Life isn't happy.
It can be. It can be.
Can't. Damn it, Philip. No, it can't. Wallow in self-pity with me.
Oh man. Geez. It's depressing me. I'm depressed, Jimmy, because this book, every time I read it, I'm like, yeah, okay.
Welcome to the show, Philip. Welcome to the show where we talk about being depressed consistently. Hey, you're not wrong. I do think it's a bit one note. So in my thought process, and I don't really, as you know, I don't really rank things all that much. I also want to highlight what Jared said here, which he said, it's monotonous. I want it to end. I give it a 5 out of 5. Philip's review. I thought that was pretty good.
That's actually not too far off, except I don't give stars, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's right. Philip's far above stars at this point. Um,
Yeah.
let his words do the talking.
Well, I always was, so I mean, yeah.
It's true. That's true. I
Yeah.
mean, you came in at a certain level. Like, I think when you started your channel, you were just like established, mainly because you have a beard, great glasses, good haircut, tweed, you know,
Yeah.
sultry voice, big
Oh,
zaddy
yeah.
energy, I would say.
All that.
All
All
of
that.
that. For sure, all of that. But I will give you this, that it is a bit one note. And when I think about like my favorite series, I always tend to put, and I don't know what I've said in the past, but I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately, Malazan over it, because I think Malazan has more range, which is very
Oh,
impressive.
yeah.
Now, what Bakker is able to do in that one note, I think is quite incredible. And
Agreed. Yeah.
when you look back on it, especially when I look back at the first trilogy, I do wonder if these 7 books could have been maybe brought down a little bit, maybe 5 books. I'm not a big person to say cut a whole book or whatever like this, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the length of it does lend to people dropping out on top of the content. I mean, the content is grotesque.
It's brutal and grotesque. I think you might be onto something. Originally, it was supposed to be a trilogy, right? With the first book. Yeah, Alan knows. And I don't have, okay, yes, you do know me, don't you? Yeah, it was originally a trilogy, wasn't it? Where the Prince of Nothing trilogy was actually supposed to be one book. Aspect Emperor was supposed to be the second book, and there was supposed to be a third book, which is as yet not written, or he wrote and he lost on his computer, or something
I,
horrible and tragic, or
I don't know. There's supposed to be a duology, the No God duology, but I also heard him say that he felt like the ending might have been perfect. Like, there's a lot to be said. I actually am one of the very, maybe few, I don't know. I see a lot of people say we need the No God. I would love it. I actually think the ending is tremendous. And even though you're not going to like the ending, I think you will agree with me that it could not have ended any other way. I think you'll agree with me on that.
There are 2 reasons. No, okay, now 3 reasons I'm going to continue reading this. I've actually I very rarely DNF a book. And I have actually thought to myself, what if I DNF'd this?
You
It's
can,
that I know. Okay, I'm not going to DNF it, only because of what you just said about the ending, and also because I'm buddy reading this with Joanna, and I
I just
can't.
DNF'd the book with Joanna today. Don't worry about it.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh no! So now I really can't do it. So I
No,
have
you
to
should
finish.
be empowered.
Oh, okay.
You should be empowered by that. You should feel comfortable.
But the third thing is Bakker is a brilliant writer. That is keeping me in this book. That I love reading his prose, because it is just so imaginative and so creative, so loaded. I could read each paragraph 3 or 4 times and probably get something new out of it each time. It's just such a rich, gifted storyteller. So I just wish he had been a little happier sometimes.
I imagine, Philip, I imagine he wants to be happier too. I would love to be happy. It would be sick. It ain't happening. At a certain point, you know, you just got to say, well, this is it. This is what I'm living with. This is what I'm dealing with. I think I've actually often wondered. So Bakker ended up having a child or children, I don't know, and has since become a family man and things. And I don't have any basis for this at all, but I've always speculated on the idea that maybe possibly he struggles to put himself in that mindset now that his life has changed so much. I wonder if he doesn't actually maybe have a different view possibly now. Because I mean, we're changing all of the time. I mean, the most popular time of changing, other than obvious like teenage years, a lot of people talk about the brain not being settled for males until like 25 to 28, somewhere around there. But I mean, I'm in my mid 30s now, and every year I'm different. I'm different than I was when I started this channel by a mile, you know? So I've always wondered if he has maybe thought back on it and maybe doesn't want to return to that. Maybe he doesn't like the attention that it brought. He obviously has faced tons of scrutiny, which is fair. I mean, he's proposing some pretty horrid things. But I would love to see you finish it, but I also completely support you in your DNFing adventures.
Well, I think it would it's probably not going to happen. I'm not going to, I very rarely DNF a book. But I can't even remember the last time I did, but it won't happen here because there's just too much going for it. But it's hard for me to read it. I'm reading it very slowly because it is just the slog of slogs. So it's yeah. I
It
don't
is
know.
a literal slog, but also there's a slog in the story that is pretty great.
Yeah.
Not to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read it, but did you enjoy some of the parallels of Lord of the Rings?
Oh, in the first two books, that I actually got a kick out of all the Lord of the Rings subversions. I think that's probably what they really are. But I think they're loving nods and subversions on Baker's part, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very well done. And for anyone who's read Lord of the Rings and reads Second Apocalypse, or particularly those first two books in Aspect Emperor, I think you'll easily recognize those nods. But yeah, that's not going to happen because One Piece is my happy place.
I was going to say, is that what you're going to balance this out with? What's next? Because Paul suggested, he said, maybe we need to recommend happier reads to restore Philip once he finishes with Baker. I recommend A Stranger in Olandria and Declare by Tim Powers. So there's a recommendation. But did you have like a palate cleanser or brain bleach?
Yeah, I mean, I have A Stranger in Alondria, but One Piece is definitely my happy place. I go there, and it's not that there aren't, difficult things that happen in One Piece.
Sure.
There's trauma, there's sorrow and loss, but there's also a lot of goofiness and happiness and laughter, and I don't think I've laughed. Not that Baker lacks a sense of humor. He has a sense of humor. I'm not saying he doesn't. But I don't laugh when I'm reading Second Apocalypse. It's more like I'm wincing or grimacing most of the time.
One of these?
Or yeah.
Kicking through the fingers, right?
Yeah.
I could see that for sure. Yeah, there is somewhat of a rebellion against the hopelessness, I think, in very small spurts, followed by a lot of defeatism. From a commune mostly, but a commune would be the vehicle for that.
He is sad Gandalf, yes.
Yeah, sad Gandalf is a good way. Disgruntled Gandalf, great way of putting it. I like that quite a bit. So I've kind of brought up Lord of the Rings multiple times. I was making fun of all the tree descriptions and stuff, but I was kind of thinking, as someone who is a big fan of Tolkien yourself, I constantly get into, me and you have talked about it on stream before, so I'm not going to rehash the Bilbo versus Frodo conversation of who's the better protagonist.
I know how you feel about Frodo.
Yeah. Oh, but I was curious, what do you think is the biggest difference between those two hobbits for like when you think about them as protagonists?
Well, I think the difference comes from the overall tone of each book, where you have the Hobbit is clearly meant to be childlike, and it is a lighter tone to it. And so Bilbo's childishness in places as he grows as a character, which is, he's got a little cute hero's journey going on in The Hobbit. So it's at a level where I think we don't mind, that the narrator's kind of winking at us and all of that. Whereas Frodo, his tale takes place in a much more serious, Tolkien has melded The Hobbit with the Silmarillion, essentially, in the Lord of the Rings. And so Frodo is in a much more epic quest. He's in a huge, vast world. Even the world feels smaller in The Hobbit to me. Middle Earth, it's still Middle Earth, but it feels smaller somehow. Like the stakes are not as high. Where, poor Frodo is also a little hobbit. He's not that different. He's almost about the same age that Bilbo was when they set out on their adventures. In my age, actually, in their early 50s. So
young men.
young fellas. Yep. But yeah, I think that because of the tonal difference, that might be one reason why Frodo gets more crap from people, because he starts out like Bilbo, a little bit inept. And his ineptness is perhaps more serious because of the stakes in The Lord of the Rings versus the stakes in The Hobbit. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think I was kind of going to go with that. I think Frodo is, and bear with me here, I'm not really meaning this like literally, but like he's the smaller character in the bigger world, whereas Bilbo is a big character in what seems to be a much smaller world. And maybe that is a bit of the selfishness coming out in Bilbo's character, because
Mm,
Bilbo does make a lot of things about him and his fears and his wants and his desires and his angers and his happiness. So Bilbo seems bigger on page to me than Frodo
yeah,
does. So
yeah,
I whenever you were going down that road about the world being more flushed out and like Lord of the Rings, that's
yeah.
kind of what I was thinking as well.
They're the
For
same size fish, but Bilbo's in a much smaller pond, I think.
Yes, and neither really want things to be done to them though. That is like the biggest similarity. Like they're different. They're very very different, but they both would not like to be insisted upon to do something major, right? They're both getting pushed out of their comfort zone, but it's just interesting to see same world, both hobbits, but and really kind of the same journey in some ways, but very different as characters, I think.
Yeah, 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 I think so. And but a lot of that is from the external factors, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite really. I like Mary. Mary's probably my favorite Hobbit, actually.
Mary is pretty cool. I mean, Sam's probably my actual favorite. Paul has a great point here. He says, Bilbo is the first hobbit in how many generations to go on an adventure? In contrast, Frodo has grown up hearing what adventure is like and has a more realistic experience. This is a fabulous point, Paul.
I agree. Yeah, that's well said. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jared actually, you've already settled the debate, but he said the real debate is between Pippin and Mary. I think Mary wins that by a landslide, an absolute
Fool of a
landslide.
took. Fool of a took.
Full
Yeah,
of a
there's.
toot. Beltube wants to know which is the best ring wraith.
I mean, probably the head one, the big baddie, the Witch King of Angmar, right? I mean that one.
Witch King is the only ring wraith that I have an action figure of, so I am going to agree.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, there's a big old controversial
That's a
take.
hot take from Anitha saying Sam is boring. A borderline bannable offense around these parts. I don't take kindly to Sam slander.
Yeah, I don't you like potatoes, Anita?
Yeah,
Come on.
what in the world? Just a hater. A lot of hate in her heart, obviously. So I've been thinking about Tolkien a lot. You know, I had my writing class that I just completed. Me and you were talking about it before we went
Yeah, I want to hear
live.
more about that. Yeah, you did a writing class, and I'm going to say what your professor said, if you don't mind. If I can, I embarrass you on air? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna. You have to correct me if I don't get this exactly right. But what Jimmy's everybody needs to hear this. What Jimmy's professor said is that. Oh gosh, what was the exact wording? That this not only I want to get this right because it was really high praise. Not only is this ready for publication, but this is a story that who would learn a lot from? What was it? The exact thing she said? You're gonna have to help me, Jimmy.
Ethics class.
Yes. Okay. People would learn a lot from this in an ethics class, which I think is such a exactly, Cassie, exactly. Uh, that's high praise, and you also managed to do that in what really is what like a couple pages, 2-3 pages. It's
Is
a
5 pages.
very
5 pages
well,
double spaced, actually.
so double space. So yeah, it would be like 3 pages max, and it's very tight, very well done. You present it right from the beginning. It's just there's this tension, there's this conflict. It's extremely well done. It's just a really well told story. So yeah, high praise from your professor. Best short story in the entire class. Actually, that was part of what the feedback was too, right? I think everybody agreed.
There was a lot of praise, and there was also a lot of other really good stories in the class that I thought was pretty great. And I was very fortunate to be with like a bunch of people who I think had really good heads on their shoulders. And some of the people, I mean, what they were writing, I was blown away, you know, especially it being like a kind of a newbie class. There was one gentleman that has actually written a bunch of, I think it was teen or middle-aged fantasy. And he wrote a very Frodo-esque story, short story. And I
Okay.
thought it was just magnificent. I mean, I
Even
thought
though
it
you
was,
hate Frodo.
I don't, all right, I do kind of hate Frodo, but yes, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was really, really good. And I thought that the just like the way that he was able to use alliteration and like a rhythm to the writing. I mean, I really thought it was pretty impressive. So it was a great experience for me. And also, Philip, thank you for reading the story and also mentioning it in the weeks that were.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, man, I loved it. I really loved it, and people need to see this story. It's going to be hopefully published somewhere, and everyone will get to read it. But you got to write more too, of course. We got to have more from the pen of Jimmy Nuts.
Yeah, working on the Diesel Clerk Chronicles currently. Amanda, thank you. You without you, I probably wouldn't have made a bunch of the jumps that I did. Amanda has been a good reading buddy, which is
Awesome.
always somebody to have. A writing buddy. I think I said reading. John says, Jimmy and Philip, you guys are the Joe Buck and Troy Aikman of live streams. That is hilarious. That's actually really funny. Philip has no idea what that means because he doesn't own a television, but I don't.
I think it has something to do with football, right? No?
Yeah.
Is that not a football reference?
Yes, it is. That's right.
Okay, I got that. I got that much. I don't really know who they are, though.
They're my favorite team, so we're all good. Though they do drink a lot, so we should be drinking, I think, to kind of match that energy. I'm not going to drink, but you can.
I've got my my
I have
mug
green
here.
tea. I have green tea. That's what I'm rocking.
Actually, I won't even tell you. Okay, it's just water in mine, but
I have water over here as well. So, writing class, right? Been thinking a lot about writing. I've been thinking about the rules of writing. I've been thinking about all of these different aspects of what you should do, what you should not do. And would you agree with me that a lot of modern fantasy, or not modern fantasy, but modern writing advice would rule Tolkien completely out of the equation? Like he would just be absolutely wrong in a lot of cases for modern writing rules?
yes, I think that a lot of modern writing advice would probably say no to a lot of what Tolkien did, and Tolkien probably wouldn't even be published if he were writing something like The Lord of the Rings today. But even just to be I think as because I'm a huge fan and I love The Lord of the Rings. It's a major inspiration for me. But I can recognize that you probably shouldn't start your fantasy novel with a 50-page info dump. I mean that's it's probably not the best way.
You gotta have action out the gate, Philip. You gotta have action.
Hook your audience right away. But it was a different time. It was just a different time. People had more tolerance for description back then. I stand by my assertion that a lot of modern readers' taste stems from their engagement with screen storytelling. And you can be much more efficient, obviously. Honestly, you don't take pages to describe a scene. You just show a scene in a couple seconds. That's what happens on the screen. So I think that has built an expectation in people that this is how storytelling works, because screens dominate. There are far more people who watch stories than who read stories.
Yeah.
And I think that even people who read stories, their expectations have been shifted ever since, television and films and now, of course, the internet and all that. And people have a lot shorter attention spans, and it's a different time. If you read letters that people wrote in the 19th century, just ordinary folks, I'm not talking about, highly educated people. They wrote letters that would seem very, fancy language, very articulate. I'm not going to say purple prose, but they're just very, very literate, So people had a different tolerance for more flowery kinds of writing, and Tolkien certainly grew up in that tradition. So, I absolutely think that Lord of the Rings would never have been published if it were written in 2025, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, would you say that there are things that Tolkien did that probably weren't favorable in Lord of the Rings? Like any story has.
In terms of just great storytelling and objectively just trying to say,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just taking out of the equation how tastes have changed, you mean? Is there just something objectively bad about the writing?
Yeah, is there something about maybe even that grates you? Maybe when you read it, or you read it and you with your writing, you're like, what is this?
To tell you the truth, I love that prologue. I hear that prologue and I'm in the Shire, and it's just, for me, it's like my little heaven, I love it. But I can recognize that most people will not enjoy that 50-page info dump at the beginning of this book, right? Also, just tonally, he didn't know where he was going yet. He was a pantser, Tolkien was, and he didn't know that Lord of the Rings was going to become a much more serious book. It was supposed to be a sequel to The Hobbit, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So Derry agrees with me.
Oh yeah, me and Jared actually were talking about this the other day, just about how like visual storytelling has changed the way people write, and in some cases, I actually think that it leads to a lot of bloat in writing. There's an argument that could be made for that because they got to describe everything, where everything is placed and which some people love. Me myself, not the biggest fan of that. Tolkien certainly, massive descriptions. Know what the forest floor looks like anywhere you might go. There is a certain amount of romanticizing in my head when I think about Lord of the Rings, but I also like to think about how writing has changed. And I thought that somebody highlighted the fact, it was T. Baggins, said Tolkien doesn't get enough credit for his variety of style. The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion are all written very differently. And I've only read the beginning of the Silmarillion. I plan on reading it in full at some point, but this is very true.
Yeah. Yeah, Silmarillion is high tragedy. It's mythos. It's a different level of storytelling altogether. Whereas The Hobbit is much more childlike, and Lord of the Rings is more humanized, especially because of the hobbits in it. Exactly. You know what, Gavin? That is well said. I also think it has payoff later in the story when the Shire is, the scouring of the Shire and all that. You feel the pain of the disfigurement of the Shire because it's been lovingly described to you. So I think it has payoff if for a patient reader or maybe just an old person like me.
I think this is also an interesting point. Putrid Sunrise claims that Tolkien was already outdated when he was published. Modernism and the Hemingway school were kings of the castle back then. I mean, I do know that critically it was not received with loving arms. It was the hippies in the 70s, from what I understand. They kind of got a hold of it and revitalized it in many ways.
Oh, Tolkien, his writing took a lot of hits from a lot of critics, for sure.
Yeah.
But some of it legitimate, some of it is just pure snobbery, though. Really. But yeah.
We love some snobbery around these parts. We love it.
Oh yeah.
It is ironic because I feel like Tolkien probably would not like hippies, but hippies are probably responsible for the resurgence of it in popularity. But
I mean, yeah, I think Tolkien would appreciate the hippies' attachment to the earth.
And neither of them like light bulbs.
Yeah.
They're fans of dirt. I think that was pretty congruent through both of those people. I also wanted to highlight this earlier. I just want to get this in here. Sammy's Pack says, I started The Other Valley. I didn't know what to expect, and I'm glad you didn't reveal too much in your review, but it's a page turner. Feels like Frederick Bachman, but way better. Well, thank you. I'm glad. I like that book. I want more from that author, and I'm hoping that his next one really wows me, but I'm glad that that I didn't put too much in the review, because that is one of those books that you're better off just going and reading and kind of going in blind. So I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So I always like to think back on the things that I've really loved as I write, what I've loved about reading, or what books have really captivated me, and then trying to dissect why that works. And it's funny because I think a lot of the things that I really enjoy, like China Miéville, Tolkien, Bakker even, they break a lot of rules. They break a lot of rules.
Exposition. Bakker actually gets away with a lot of exposition, which is a big no-no these days. Yeah, and he's just so talented, he can do that. But yeah, it's true. That's true, Jared. Yeah.
I mean, I do believe that the Shire is like the ultimate cozy fantasy, personally. I mean, there's probably some critiques to be made about it socially, and Sam serving Frodo, all that, but it does seem like a place I'd like to have a beer.
For sure. We got to meet at the Green Dragon someday. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I hope so. I'm talking a lot about other people's books, but I also wanted to bring up your book because, you are paying me to advertise, of course. But Gavin says, was the Broken Binding edition of Way of Adan out during the last Chatting Minutes of Philip? My copy is gorgeous. No, and I also have it, and I messaged Philip and I said, wow. I mean, honestly, I think one of my favorite Broken Binding editions that I have, and there are plenty of them that I love, but this is definitely in that top 5 for me. What did you think? Like, what are your feelings of that? Is that surreal?
It is completely surreal. It is just amazing to have this vision that's been knocking around in this skull here for, 2 decades take this form that is out there in the world and that people are appreciating. And I've heard from a lot of people like you who have lots of broken binding books and have said this is the most beautiful one that they have, and I'm just blown away by that. As somebody I don't personally have a lot of special editions and things like that, so
Yeah.
I couldn't resist buying the Malazan ones because I have an excuse though. My mass market paperback Malazan books, I can't even read them anymore. The print is too small. So I needed a replacement, so I had to get the broken binding editions. But yeah, it's incredible, Jimmy. It's really something to have my story out there this way, and to have people reading it and enjoying it, and having the art enhance it. And also now there's an official Edan trilogy theme song that was
Yeah.
written by our friend Nikhil Koparkar, who has the channel Shelf Esteem, and what an amazing job he did on that. That was a video I just released recently with the art from the broken binding and the music there, and the cello, by the way, played by my daughter, Rohana.
Amazing.
Just a super special thing for me to have. And I hope everybody checks out that video, because you need to hear how talented Nikhil is. He has really done a tremendous job. And this is a guy, by the way, if you don't know Nikhil, he has written, he's the real deal. He's written music for TV shows like The Wheel of Time or his Dark Materials. I mean, he has serious credentials.
Wow.
He's written music for all kinds of television shows and movies. He just was at an award show where he was nominated for an award, rubbing shoulders with Hans Zimmer. Okay. So this is the real deal. Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
so what is it like working with other artists, not just visual, but also from this point, music? Like, what is that like? And whenever someone is now giving their interpretation of this thing that, like you said, you've had in your head for almost 2 decades, was there anything surprising to you in the way that they interpreted what you wrote?
First of all, I want to say that it is such a privilege to work with these creatives, to work with people who are so talented. And I feel so fortunate. I feel so lucky to have worked with people like Jack Shepard, who I saw his map of the First Law world, and I could not believe that somebody would be that dedicated. Like, first of all, Abercrombie, you needed a map anyway, buddy. I mean,
he would not agree.
I know. He was being all subversive and all that. But I think that the First Law world is much better off with a map. I'm a little old school that way, I guess. But Jack just did this out of love. He made this map. And Abercrombie saw the map, and he said, I think we should put that in a special edition. And the Curious King special edition of the Blade itself has Jack's map in it. And I saw that, play out on the internet, and I thought to myself, I'm going to ask that guy if he'll do my map for me. I had drawn my own map, and I don't think it was too bad. I was a bit of an artist back in the day, but Jack made it so much better. And I just, one of my better decisions was to take on him and it makes me feel so good that this journey of mine can include other people. I feel so good that what I'm doing can support other creative people. And now Jack is actually making a go of it as a map maker. Before he had a full-time job, but this is his thing now. He's making maps for fantasy books. And I just love that he's able to do this. It makes me so happy when I think of that. And I worked, my artist for, the original paperbacks, Kira Gregory, a longtime friend of my older daughters. I was just so happy to be able to support Kira. It was just so great. And now working with Nikhil and all the people at the Broken Binding, I mean, Renee Agner and Peng Lu, and just everybody who had any hand in the making of that. So much talent. And it makes me happy that this story that I came up with has been able to support in this way, other creative people, and just hopefully put something out there in the world that it makes somebody's life a little better. Gives them a beautiful experience, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's probably interesting to watch someone perceive your work and then like illustrate it or bring it into live.
Oh, it's fun. It's really fun. Yeah.
Were
really
any
fun.
of them different than what you thought they would be, like specifically with the visual?
They all were, but that's okay. I'm not, a stickler for everything has to be the way I imagine it. I'm not one of those persons who insists that an adaptation has to be a beat for beat repeat of the book, right? I think that would be actually awful television show or film. So I love seeing someone else's interpretation. It was a thrill to me when I don't know if he's here in the chat or not, but Daniel Klauser.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, he's here. He on his own just made this wonderful portrait of the elf in the Adan trilogy, and he also made an Aglak, and they were just brilliant, and I loved them, and I showed them off on my I put out a community post, and I love that creativity can spring from other, from engagement with one form of creativity can bring life to another form of creativity. And fantasy is great for that, because fantasy is the genre that really is all about the imagination. Mm-hmm. And I love how fantasy particularly seems to be supportive of music and art and just all kinds of stuff. Like, we fantasy fanatics, we love art, we love music, we love great stories. It all is part of the same vision, I feel. And I think that all supports each other in some beautiful ways. So I'm just thrilled to have this special edition, to have this theme song. Everybody go, please listen to the theme song. And Nikhil has put it out on his channel as well, so you could check it out there. But I think it's available now on Spotify and some other like music platforms.
Have you ever opened Spotify, Philip?
I don't really know what it is, to be honest. My daughter has it. My daughter has it.
It's all the rage with the kids, I hear.
Yeah. Hey, I just joined Instagram, Jimmy. I just joined Instagram.
And, I see you sharing your posts, and look, someone else is reading my books. I'm like, gosh, Philip, where's the tennis footage? I'm here for the tennis footage.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll make some more tennis videos.
People would love for you to do some tennis on the stories. I think people would love that.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. Yeah.
Philip, I love watching people enjoy your books. I'm just kidding. Just so everybody knows, I'm only teasing Philip.
But it was fun. My first reel, by the way, on Instagram got, I think, I don't know how many it has now, but it has a ton of views. It has like 20 something thousand views, like almost 30,000 views maybe. And it's because of course, the Broken Binding shared it. But so I cheated a little bit there.
Hey, it still counts. And it
counts, right? It
plenty
counts.
of eyes. It's a whole nother platform where people, like, some people don't come from there to here, and you'll get new eyes on the books, and they'll continue to grow over time, which is really awesome. Go ahead.
You finish.
Oh, go ahead.
First.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. What I was going to say is I didn't realize that Instagram is such a pretty place. Like, all these people, I'm actually embarrassed to put photos on Instagram because my crappy book pictures can't measure up to just the gorgeous, the lighting and everything. Just the books are posed in a way it's just so.
Oh, you're talking about books.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about like the other side of Instagram. Yeah.
I only see books.
Okay. Okay.
That's all I am is on Instagram so far. Anyway,
that's a good place to be. No, the aesthetic photos. Philip, I actually way back in the day. So when I started this channel, I actually was like going to be on IG. I was like, I'm going to take all these pictures. I think I went set up to take one. I was like, this is way too much work. Like, I am not doing this. Like, because it takes talent to like frame things and know the lighting.
Yeah. It really does, and I'm amazed at how many gorgeous pictures there are of books.
Yeah,
and I'm also amazed at how long I can just stare at them too. So
You're right. And also, I've seen a lot of different versions of books that I love on Instagram because you get people from all over the world. So you might see like a German version or Italian version of like Malazan, for instance. Those ones are always pretty cool. And that's awesome because I really don't have anywhere else to see it unless if I would go and search that myself, which I'm not gonna do. So there is something cool about that for sure.
Yeah. So now I'm learning. I'm learning about social media, Jimmy.
Hey, I'm proud of you, man. Never stagnate. Never stagnate.
Old dogs can learn new tricks.
That's right. And you're doing it all the time. I mean, look at you.
Look at me. Look at me.
Your shot's nice and like it's nice and balanced, nice parallel. Like I love your backdrop.
Yeah. I've got the wings here.
It's so good.
Enclosed in books.
It brings you to the center and then you're nice and forward. I mean, it's honestly, it's better than mine, I'd say. I like it.
No. Let's not go too far.
You're right. I'm blowing hot air here. I'm blowing hot air up your curdle, as
my
they would
curdle.
say.
Yes. Everybody, I'm trying to bring back the curdle and preferably in tweed.
Well, no such luck so far, but who knows what the future could have for you, Philip. Maybe it'll be back.
You never know.
Oh my goodness. So, Dan features, and Lord of the Rings also features somebody who is kind of an unlikely hero, or maybe someone that you would not expect to be a hero. And there's a book that I'm reading right now. I'll talk about my wrap up. I'm kind of saving it for that. But like the main character is a very popular book, and the main character is also kind of not downtrodden, but maybe a little bit weaker than everyone else. Do you feel like there's an opportunity, or maybe not even, I shouldn't say an opportunity, but do you feel like stories might start to trend back into that realm, maybe even outside of the fantasy genre? We'll say fantasy genre here. Do you feel like maybe just with the feeling of us all not feeling like we have agency and being glued to our phones or whatever else, like, do you think that there's a kind of like a renaissance for that type of protagonist possible in the fantasy genre?
I feel like that is a timeless need, and trends come and go. And
sure.
I'm not someone who's ever going to be dismissive of, let's say, like grimdark. To me, grimdark is fantasy's version of existentialism, and it absolutely we need that. I have the utmost respect for the explorations of meaning or the lack thereof in grimdark literature. I appreciate even this book. I have, I've read quite a bit of. I mean, I can't say I'm the best read when it comes to grimdark, but I've read a fair amount. I love Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire trilogy. I'm a huge fan of Joe Abercrombie's work. I've read everything First Law except for the latest novella or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, or short story. But anyway, I feel that we need people who have that vision that, yeah, the universe just does not have any meaning to it, that there is no intrinsic meaning to life. But I also find it very empowering. The existentialist response to that lack of meaning is, well, we can craft meaning. We can carve meaning out of this existence just by putting on our boots in the morning, strapping on our sword, going out in the world, and maybe making some connections with other people that are meaningful and affirming those people and acting with courage and compassion. Maybe we can make some meaning out of this life by doing that. And so I find that actually to be quite beautiful. Now, that said, there's another side, let's say more traditional side of fantasy. We could call it epic fantasy if we want. I'm generalizing a lot here.
Sure.
People could poke holes in everything I'm saying. Yeah. So with that caveat, let's call epic fantasy the type of fantasy that is, let's see, more overtly affirmative, that when you get to the end of the journey, the point is for both the protagonist and the reader to feel a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a calling, a sense of clarity. That achieving the quest successfully has empowered the character and the reader. And that is something that we will always need. We will always need stories of that nature because life is full of chaos and darkness and pain and sorrow. And stories are one means by which we struggle through that, and we give a name to our pain, to our struggles. We can wrestle with them when we are in a story. It's actually easier to wrestle with them in a story, particularly one in a world that doesn't exist, that it doesn't too closely resemble our world. That psychic distance is something that fantasy can deliver like no other genre, in my opinion. And so I think that there's obviously a need for that, and there always will be. We've always needed stories. We are the storytelling creature, and the oldest stories we have are fantasy. Gilgamesh, there are fantastical elements to Gilgamesh. You look at Beowulf. I had to say Beowulf. Sorry.
I knew it was coming. I was waiting.
Beowulf, obviously, fantastical elements. Look at the Mahabharata. There's all kinds of fantastical elements in there. So to me, there is a purpose for storytelling that is overtly affirmative and confers a sense of meaning. And there's also an important purpose for the questioning type of story, for the story that doesn't end decisively, where there's ambiguity and where there's a sense of anxiety that is something that I think most people can relate to at times. And so I'm glad that we have it all. Really, we need it all.
Yeah, definitely. I feel as if it's also weird to think about the fact that some people will point to fantasy and say, it's unrealistic, whatever. Like, these are people doing all these crazy things. When really, I think it's actually a fairly common belief that one person can't change the world, which is where, honestly, a lot of conspiracy theories kind of go out of that. It always has to be more. It has to be like a cabal. It has to be these big things. But in reality, I mean, with technology the way it is now, a single person can change the world. I mean, they really can. I mean, not to be too topical, but Luigi would be a very good example of this. Now, his impact ripples and things change. Maybe it's not the biggest, but I mean, that's a big change. That's a big change someone can enact. Good, whatever. I'm not.
That's not a judgment. You're
yes,
just saying.
I'm just saying, but it certainly is a change, right? Enacted by one person with a mission. So it's actually very realistic to think that one person can change the world. So maybe it's somewhat of a realistic thing that fantasy does whenever they have someone like a Frodo change the course of history.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think so. And we need those Frodos. We need that sense that someone small can make a difference. That what we do matters. I think that's terribly important. So
it is important. I think in to also know that it doesn't always have to be someone else. It can also be you. And maybe even just being able to change your life is big enough, right? It's all about the battles, which is why I think actually like cozy fantasy, Legends and Lattes, all about a person trying to change their profession, change their world, and then things coming from the back. Like, I think all that's pretty relevant, and maybe even more relevant than it's ever felt before, just because I've felt, I don't know. There are times where I just feel helpless, and there's so many things that I would like to enact change in. So maybe it can lead. Of course, you have to act upon it, but maybe it can lead to something like that. If you would want to.
I hope so.
I hope so too. As someone who's more of an existentialist, I hope so too, Philip.
Yeah.
Fever said, wasn't Conan a bit of affirmative existentialist? A bit of an affirmative existentialist. What do you think, Philip?
I mean, certainly there was no lack of courage, right? So yeah, I mean, I think you could make that argument. Why not? Yeah.
I think you could, absolutely. And he just said, but Frodo had a lot of help along the way. We also need people who take Frodo's to the end.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That's a very important point. He had his Sam, and he had his Gollum too. Let's not forget that. They would never have made it without Gollum. I think
it's actually true. Wow.
Yeah. Never would have made it without Gollum.
Well said. And not someone that you would necessarily want to call a friend at times, right?
Nope.
Samwise says, the famous line that Schindler's List uses, he who saves one life saves the world entire.
So true. Yeah. and not to get too sappy about this, but what we do here touches a lot of lives. What I hope that what I do in the classroom matters, that my students,
Yeah.
the engagement that happens there will help them to be better people. And we reach thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I have 120, 130 students a semester. We reach a lot more people than that here on this platform. And I
Yeah.
think you have had many people reach out to you. I know you have, who have said stuff like, I just want to thank you because you've helped me to become a reader. You've helped me
Yeah.
to appreciate, such and such a story or whatever it might be. You've had those people reach out to you. That really matters, Jimmy. That really matters. The community that you've created, the interactions, the connections that have happened, whatever else happens in the future, nothing can change the fact that the videos you've made, the conversations you've created, they've made a huge difference for a lot of people. A lot of people.
Well, I hope so. I can say that I've never been too proud of myself in my life. In fact, a lot of times I would look back on accomplishments and be like, who cares? But I hope, or I shouldn't even say, I do feel proud of what we've done here, like the last 5 years, and
Yeah.
trying to grow, trying to do better, trying to always push the envelope and make things more fun and read more challenging things. So yeah, I hope that is the case, because I do feel I feel a sense of pride in
You
that.
should. You should. And by the way, people, whenever one of you leaves a comment like that for us, it makes a huge difference for us. It's so just makes our day. It is encouraging. Sometimes I have literally thought to myself, I just cannot make a video today. I'm not feeling it. And then somebody leaves a comment, and it's a night and day. Suddenly I have the motivation again. So it's a huge thing. And I know you felt that too, Jimmy, I'm sure.
Yeah, I have. And I'm always, so I think for me, I always feel moved when someone tells me about a book that helped them or moved them. And I'm just happy I read the book, even if I didn't like the book as much. I'm like, I don't know. There's something about that. I do believe in like the power of art and of literature deeply.
Yes. Oh, we need it so much.
If I hold any belief, that might be the belief I hold, actually, is that there is something almost mythical or supernatural about art that is hard to explain, but like moves you. It's a weird thing, and it can be music, it can be books, it can be paintings, it could be anything. Mrs. Nutt said, I will continue to hold that pride for you. So proud of everything you've accomplished. Well, thank you, Kels. Thank you very much. You're very sweet.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
So
yeah, there's a story that I teach most semesters in Intro to Lit called Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. And I've never read a better story for explaining why we need music. And you could insert art or literature or whatever, but in this case, it's about music. It's just such a beautiful story, and I get to the end of that, and it's so moving. And it's about, there is a lot of suffering that is portrayed in the story, but the role of music as a means through which musicians particularly, they stare at the roar rising from the void, and they impose a kind of order on it. And when that order hits the air, it elevates all of us. It enables all of us to wrestle with that darkness that is something that we all face. But the musician, the artist, the writer, they're often spending a lot of their time looking at that void, and they do a great service for us in translating it into a form that we can, put a name to. So yeah, I think it's vital. It's so vital, and I'm with you 100% when you say that is something you can believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost frightening to me how much it can affect me and in my moods. And staring into that void is torturous, but to read or hear or whatever, something that fills that void is like one of the more powerful things. Bookish said, Jimmy's one of the goats. Thank you. And thank you so much for introducing me to Percival Everett, Bookish. I honestly can't thank you enough. I'm about to finish American Fiction, the movie, which is based on an erasure. And what a fantastic film. I mean, the film is every bit as good as the book or better. I mean, it's so good. And Percival Everett, I just think, is outstanding. So, Bookish, shout out to you. You're one of the goats. Derry says, speaking for myself, living with profound depression and PTSD, it's not just about the book, Jimmy. It's that you give us a place to share something that's meaningful to us. I'm glad that I can do that. Alan says he hearts me. That's very sweet. Usually he's yelling at me. It's not even in all caps. I don't know if he means it if it's not in all caps. Sarah Beth said, I do enjoy both of your channels. I've been overwhelmed at my job the last few months, and watching participating in live streams helps take the edge off. Hey, me too. Me too. It's not fun out there in the old professional world for many people. Yep. Austin says, you've helped me and moved me, Jimmy. These discussions are art. I don't know if they're art, but I am very much happy to provide them.
They are art, Jimmy, and you are the maestro.
I don't know. See, I this is where I might get in trouble. I've always found that like reviews or critiquing are inherently less worthy than art. I've always felt that way.
You need to read Oscar Wilde's take on that.
What is his take? Because Dorian Gray's fantastic.
Yeah. So I can't remember the name of the essay, but there's a pretty well-known essay where Oscar Wilde basically says that actually it's the critic that gives the art meaning, and the art would be nothing without the critic. So it's a very interesting take. It's worth reading. You may not agree, but it is worth engaging with. It's not my personal position, but I love Oscar Wilde's writing. So.
I think Oscar Wilde is a fraud and a hat. No, I'm just kidding. See, I'm critiquing Philip. I'm giving him worth by telling him he's trash. Dorian Gray, fantastic. Love the writing in that, and it's very powerful. That's a powerful book. Self-image. Oof. Black and Blue Harry said that was such a needed live stream. This right here is what BookTube's all about. Well, that's that. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. James Baldwin is fantastic. Yes, people are supporting American Fiction, the movie. I cannot tell you guys need to watch it. It is so good, so relevant. The book is also amazing. Obviously, I would be a huge fan if people would read more Percival Everett. Have you ever read any Percival Everett?
No, I have not.
So he's taught, I believe, literature. I don't know exactly what he teaches, but he's been a professor for a long time, and this guy has just been writing bangers for like 3 decades. Like just pumping out books, and he's finally starting to get some notoriety. Not that he wasn't, like he's always been critically acclaimed, but like now a movie deal and these things. And I've read 2 books by him, and I just thought both were outstanding. I mean, tremendously good books. And he writes in different genres. He writes with a lot of irony and just has a command of the language that most people would only dream of having, I think.
Wow. Can you remember the titles of the 2 books that you've read by him?
Yeah, Erasure, which is essentially about a Black author, but kind of a write-in maybe for Percival Everett being frustrated at the things that were being published and what publishers wanted from him, which was to talk about like an authentic Black experience, which he felt was not his Black experience. Yeah. And he was very jaded by this, so he ends up writing what he considers to be a trash book, but plays into all the bad stereotypes that these publications want, like these publishers want, ends up getting an absurd book deal, of course. He writes underneath a pseudonym. So then he has to like play this character. And the interesting thing about the book is that he's actually a character that doesn't really believe in race. You know, as a Black man, he's like, I don't really care about this. Like, I don't see this. But he ends up facing that while doing this, like what he considers like trash stereotype book. And he actually starts facing some of his own pretension, because at the root of the story, actually what it's really about is him and his family and a lot of trauma in the family. And it's all about kind of like understanding your place in the world. It's a very powerful book. And it's funny. I mean, there's a lot of good humor in there as well. It's not all dark and bleak. And then I read James, which is the Huckleberry Finn story about James, and takes it in a whole new direction, but still I thought was just fantastic. Like I thought it was a page turner. All of his books are like less than 300 pages. They're usually like 200 pages, which is great. And yeah, just an excellent writer. I think you would very, very much enjoy what he's doing there.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Highly recommend. And you know, obviously he's a professor, you're a professor. And I wanted to ask you about this because you've talked so much about how you've taught books. And I was curious, like, what is it like teaching a book? Like, we all know how reading a book is. Most of us write reviews or film video reviews or talk about books. What is it
Yeah.
like? Like, how does one teach a book?
Oh, it's not that different from what we do here on BookTube,
Okay.
but you know, I don't know if you saw any of the videos that AP and I did. So AP being a critical dragon, we
Yes.
did a series on basically how to analyze stories,
Mm-hmm.
and what we did in that series is essentially what we would do in an introduction to literature class. That's basically it, except we use a lot more fantasy examples than we would in a normal intro lit, because we both love fantasy and we're here, and that's our channels are much more known for fantasy. So, but yeah, I mean, essentially that's all it is when you're talking about a story and you're trying to be closer to the objective side of the spectrum, and trying to be analytical about it, you can talk about the narrative perspective, for example. And that's something we would do here. You know, is it a first person narrator? If so, is it an unreliable one maybe? Or, you know, and what kind of unreliable narrator? Because they're, you know, are we meant to think that this narrator is untrustworthy or simply naive, you know? And how does that affect the way the story gets told and the theme of the story, you know? Or is it a third person narrator? If so, is it omniscient or limited omniscient? Or is it, you know, an objective narrator that doesn't see into anybody's head? It just tells you what happens on a physical level. And what would be the advantage of that, you know?
Yeah.
What would be the advantage of having a narrator who cannot tell you what's going on within anybody's mind, you know? So those are the kinds of things we teach, you know, narrative perspective. We talk about characters, how you analyze characters, whether they're flat or round or static or dynamic or what have you. Who's the protagonist? What or who is the antagonist? You talk about symbols and how they usually function on various levels simultaneously, and they're usually suggestive of multiple connotations. You talk about, emphasize, you know, look at the title. Why did the author title the story this? Does it, you know, is the author pointing toward some theme with the title? You know, that kind of thing. We just do it, you know, here without maybe thinking it through as analytically, but I think pretty much anybody who wants to can do that type of analysis. It's really not rocket science, I guess. So
You're getting yourself out of a job when you do this, right? This is
yeah.
dangerous territory, Phil.
Well, the more you do it, the better you get at it, maybe.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, there's a tendency, I feel, to think of what we do here as just mere entertainment, and I don't think that's true. I think that what we do here is often analysis. Like, there's people like Alan out there who insist that he doesn't like themes and philosophy and all that. He's actually one of the deepest guys I know. I mean, he really does a great job of talking about themes and stuff. And he'll never admit it, but he does. Don't you think?
He enjoys certain themes, and he will talk with passion about those things, but the themes aren't relevant to him, then he doesn't care. And I think that's valid, actually. And that's why people are always like, you're reading sad grandma books. And I'm like, that's just who I am. We
all have our favorite themes, just like authors. Authors have their style is largely dependent, not just on the diction and the word choice and things small like that, but the themes that they love, the images that they repeat. They're working on something. Authors are going through their own like psychotherapy by writing. You know, they're working on something. And usually they keep coming back to it again and again and again, because you never quite figure it all out, do you?
No, you really don't. And one thing you just said that is so interesting is like how intentional things can be. Yeah. But like, we really never know how intentional things are. I remember watching this video. It was so good. It was AP, Critical Dragon, and he was talking to Ian Esselmont. And he was talking about how this thing, I don't remember what it was, but it was intentional and something like that. And Ian goes, yeah, no, it wasn't intentional at all, really. And it just, you could tell if he's like, come on, man. Like, I'm trying to like illustrate a point here. And Ian's just like, I wish it was, but it wasn't. It's just, so funny. You know, sometimes those things do happen, but there are some people who are super intentional with what they do. I mean, Erickson, at least, and I'm sure Esselmont has things he's very like particular about, but in that instance, he wasn't. Yeah. You know,
I would be surprised if there were any writer who would say, I meant every single thing that I wrote. The story sometimes takes you places that I'm a huge planner myself. I planned out. I had this massive outline, and I thought I knew exactly what was going to happen. No, in the process of, oh, I didn't realize you were still there, Alan. Jeez. Oh, oh man, I'll have to take it all back now. But absolutely, I agree. There's a lot of good analysis on BookTube. Totally agree. And the archetype series as well. That's the stuff we do. Yeah, and what AP and I do, except we're just a little more goofy here on YouTube. Yeah. I mean, what the heck was I talking about, Jimmy?
Well, we were just talking about the price of eggs. No, I'm just kidding. We were just discussing about themes, what's relevant, what's intentional from an author, what isn't intentional.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so every author probably there's stuff sloshing around in that cauldron of influences in anybody's brain that you just don't know how it's going to emerge. And I think even somebody like Erickson, I'm sure that's true. Gene Wolfe, very intentional, but even there had to be things that surprised him along the way. I can speak personally. When writing the Adan trilogy, I didn't realize how important it was for me to work out how I felt about religion when I started writing that. I didn't realize that this was going to be a story. I knew there was going to be a holy war, but I didn't realize the degree to which what I was really doing was trying to figure out how I felt about spirituality and religion in this trilogy. And so it was in that sense, a kind of personal exercise that maybe some people can relate to.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I've said this many times, but it's relevant since you're reading it. It's like, Bakker's first trilogy is all about doubt, and then the sequels are all about belief. And if there's one thing you can say about the Bakker stuff is like he does explore radical belief.
Yeah. Well, he's clearly, and he said this in interviews, Bakker is not a fan of certainty. And I share that, actually. I'm also somebody who's frightened by people who absolutely know the truth and they're going to shove it down your throat. That sets off some alarms for me when I engage with somebody like that. So I think I respect Bakker a lot for his wariness of certainty and his exploration of faith and doubt and all of that it's quite brilliant. No accident that Prince of Nothing is very closely modeled on the first Crusade, obviously.
Sure. Right? Yeah. Almost a complete retelling at some points. For sure. Jared says they can't plan everything, meaning authors, as that's not how communication works. We all take big leaps of meaning every time we speak.
That's right.
And Gabriel said, Jared disagreed. That's precisely what rewriting does. And then Jared followed up with, even when you're rewriting, there's always gaps that get filled in by the audience. Very interesting.
True. Yeah. Oh, they're both right. Because there is some intentionality involved in editing and rewriting and all of that. But even then, there are things that happen that you don't anticipate. And what happens in the mind of the reader is never going to be exactly the vision that the writer had. It's an imperfect transfer. When you put your vision on this dead tree that you're putting these little symbols on, and someone else sees those symbols and interprets them into something that they envision in their brain, it's not going to be the same thing ever. Really.
Yeah. And that's kind of scary in many ways. I've often been surprised and terrified by the idea that I'm perceived online. I try not to think about it because it honestly sends me spiraling. But to think about perception, it's a wild thing because when you say, I can actually just say something verbatim and someone can take it in a totally different way. And even with further explanation, it can still be something totally different to them. And that is, honestly, that's something I really struggle with, just accepting that's just reality of it. And you also don't always get to re-explain things. And that can be very tough. And then putting into a written word is maybe even more daunting than being on something like this, where, this reach will stop when YouTube stops being a platform. With writing, usually you're going to be able to be passed on as long as you sell enough books. I guess they'll keep reprinting them, right? But that's just something, I guess it's true for writing as much as it is doing stuff like this, which is somewhat terrifying to be honest.
But it's part of the reimagining of stories. I'm sure that if we were able to somehow resurrect William Shakespeare or something like that,
If he existed.
If he existed, maybe he was really Marlowe. Who knows? Whatever.
Do you think he existed?
Yes, I think that.
So you think the story, the canon story,
the conspiracy theories are fun for a few minutes to toy with, but yeah, he existed, and there's plenty of interesting speculation along that, but no real reason to think that he didn't exist. But as far as I have seen, but if we could revive this person today, and if I'm quite sure that he would be astonished at what has been said about his plays. If he could somehow read all of the scholarly discourse about his plays and interpretations, and I'm quite sure there's a lot in there that he didn't intend, but that doesn't invalidate that. There are layers and layers and layers of discourse that have been built on these plays now. And now they're part of these plays in a way that I think is kind of cool. It's a kind of an inheritance of tradition and interpretation, and it can change from generation to generation as well. So there's a way in which stories are communal like that. I mean, they used to always be. There was no concept of the author as the owner of the story. That's all copyright and modern, capitalist ideas, but stories have always been communal. They've always been the property of everyone, and they've always been retold and reinterpreted and poured over. And that's the nature of stories, and we're never going to really be able to change that, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Communal is a really good way of putting it. I think that's excellent, and I think that it is doubly so for like adaptations and things, which I've talked about at length, and Erickson's take on it, and how he actually believes it's a complement to change things as it goes on, to continue to let the text breathe and grow and change, which is not the popular opinion online.
No, but if I ever, and it probably will never happen, but if a miracle happened and somebody wanted to adapt my books, I would stay away. I would say, okay, you do your thing, you do your interpretation. I'm not going to be on the scene insisting, oh no, you can't change this detail, this is too important, or it's an adaptation. It's not the same story. The book is always there if somebody wants to read the book, right? They're not going to take your book away, so you don't have to be too upset that the adaptation doesn't match the vision that you have in your mind of what you think the story is, right?
Yeah, some of my the biggest fans of the Wheel of Time TV show, as it's like progressed and gotten better, are people who actually love the books. Like, a lot of people think it's just for non-book readers, but I actually know a lot of book readers are like, it's something different. This is just something different, and I'm enjoying it, and I think that's actually probably the better way of being most of the time.
I mean, look, AP and I have been covering the 2 seasons of both Wheel of Time. We picked the winners, didn't we? We covered Wheel of Time, and we covered the Rings of Power, the first 2 seasons of those. We couldn't do House of the Dragon, which everybody liked. Well, no, not everybody liked the second season, I guess.
Yeah, it was fine. People were crazy.
Yeah,
but
anyway,
I could go on a rant about it, but I won't.
we should save that rant for the 3rd hour, I guess. But
I'll get a drink and do it.
There we go. That'll help for sure. But no, we've found Rings of Power and Wheel of Time. In my case, actually, I actually think Rings of Power even more so, to have not that either one is the best fantasy program ever made. Okay, I'm not going to go out on that limb, but there's a lot better storytelling there than people are giving them credit for, and I think that there's just this bandwagon effect that can happen where we'll get oh my goodness. Speaking of the devil, I mean, you're not supposed to be here either, man. Oh my goodness.
AP in the chat. I'm so used to. I still think of him being in Ireland. I'm like, dude, it's like 5 a.m. Like, what are you doing? But then I realized that's
he's sweating and being bitten by mosquitoes right now in Florida. So.
I hope he's drinking water.
Stay hydrated there, AP. So hopefully he's doing okay. But we have found a lot of really great moments in these series, and I think anybody who's open to watching these shows without insisting that they have to conform to their idea of what the book is,
Right.
will get a lot more from the show. Not that it'll be their favorite or they'll think it's fantastic, but I don't think that people who come to it with a more open mind would necessarily hate everything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I Critical Dragon says heavily medicated at the minute. Well, I hope
yes. Migraines.
It is that season. I hope you feel better, AP. I know that's something that is very impactful on you and not in a good way. So I hope that you start feeling better, dude. I'm sure listening to Philip drone on isn't going to help any migraine. No, I'm just kidding. So I'll say this as someone who covered House of the Dragon season 2 and saw the reactions, and there's valid criticisms for sure. It wasn't perfect, but it's still very good television in my opinion.
They were going for something different there. It was a little more artsy.
Also got interfered with the studio because Warner Brothers is just completely inept at running a company, especially a media company. I mean, it's embarrassing how bad it is. I mean, they come in and they said, "Oh, you wrote the 10 episodes. We're actually cutting you to 8." What can you do? Like, you have to make concessions. And it was like, do we shrink the story down, or do we have a disappointing season finale, comparative to what we wanted? That's what it came down to, right? People don't care to hear about that. They just want to latch on to something. But I, honest to God, feel this way. I think that internet discourse has like jumped the shark. And some people are going to say it's always been this way, but I actually think it's actually worse. I think season 8 of Game of Thrones completely changed the way that the internet interacts with media, and that everyone is just waiting for the moment where they can join that negative side. Like, even whenever it doesn't, whenever there's nuance to it. Severance is my favorite TV show on air currently. I think it's literally like one of the best television shows of all time, and could end up being the best television show I've ever watched. I think it's super relevant to today. You should absolutely watch it. It's sci-fi. It's fantastic.
Okay.
It's speculative fiction, but it's like sci-fi, right? Okay. I would call it Dickian, maybe an Orwell Dickian type deal. But right. I have a feeling we're going to get to a certain point in the show, no matter what, where everyone flips and hates it. Like, it's just inevitable that it's going to happen. And one of the reasons why I think this happens is the nature of online communities now being so like divided off into echo chamber. Like, you can go find a subreddit for that specific thing you want. Like, I'm really into model cars. I'm not, but let's say I was. I go on Reddit. I go and engage in this thing, and I can immerse myself in that thing. Now, what a lot of people do is they immerse themselves, they jump out. They immerse themselves, they jump out. Like new hobbies and stuff like this. But with television, the interesting thing is that the more popular it is, the more you feel like having the same conversations again, because you like the thing so much. And I think that people actually burn out on the discourse and take it out on the show, because in that discourse, you start to formulate what you think the story should do or the way it should go. And then when that doesn't line up for you, then you're disappointed, which, may or may not be valid to some degree. I think that it's also the case that some people don't know how to feel about anything because they haven't engaged in a manner of like breaking down a story, or they haven't broke down the meaning behind something or how things are done. So they actually wait. And then whenever like the majority is like, yeah, this show now sucks, they're like, okay, this show sucks. Like, cause they're not doing their own thought process.
And then they come to our video about episode 3 of season 2 of Wheel of Time, and they parrot the discourse that they've been hearing in their little echo chamber and spew about how could we possibly like this show, and blah blah, and because they may not even watch the thing, but they've been hearing all of this. Yeah, Alan, that's right. Outrage equals engagement. Yeah, for in the minds of many. Yeah.
AP says, Jimmy hates model cars and people who like cars. How dare he? I've outed myself.
You're so elitist, Jimmy. Yeah.
Gosh darn it. Severance is absolute fire. So apparently someone put a comment and said that apparently there's already something happening that's polarizing about Severance. So Philip, I don't actually engage online about TV shows anymore. Like, I try not to.
I mean, you're wise. You're a wise man.
I just cannot do it. And Mitch also mentioned that Gurm's disparaging honestly ruined any chance of a House Dragon redemption in the internet community. That goose is cooked. You are correct. And I will say, so there's some personal stuff there that no one knows about. That's fine. But I thought some of Gurm's points were null. and void. I actually didn't really agree with him on a lot of stuff, which
I think he should have kept his mouth shut. Actually,
I would agree. So and this is all speculation, but supposedly he was lied to, and I can understand feeling like your trust has been breached. There were certain agreements and promises made to him about certain pieces, but this is a guy who got mad at a character I can't even remember. George got mad that he was left out of the main series of Game of Thrones, like back before everyone turned on it. Like we're talking about like season 1 or 2. I can't even remember the character's name. So that's how you know this character does not matter. And he wrote like a blog post and was pissed about it. Like he's like, they cut this character and it's bullshit. It's like, George, calm down. Just calm down a little bit, bud. And I'm obviously a huge George fan. He's probably my favorite author, but like pump the brakes. Yeah. I actually was not on the George train with that one. That was one of my few times where I was like kind of disappointed in my goat. But
I mean, the guy has experience writing in television, obviously, as well as writing his books. Immensely talented, and I have huge respect for his books. But again, I think it would be better if he wouldn't make comments like that. Really,
it eventually got, I think, taken down because I'm sure he breached a contract somewhere, and also. I actually think he was a great television writer, and he's written some amazing episodes of Game of Thrones, and he's helped write some House of Dragon. But he's also not in the business right now. Like it's a different ball game right now, and there's a whole different environment, and streaming has changed the game in many ways. So, but just in general, like online discourse and these things, and when it comes to visual mediums, I find to be way less engaging than like our book communities. I think that they're far
well.
better.
The bar is lower, I think, in a way, isn't it? Because there's more effort involved in reading a book than in watching a TV show or a movie. So you actually have to be really it's somewhat intentional, at least when you go about reading a book. I think.
I agree. It's more of an investment. I find it more engaging. I really struggle with television. I do
too.
Yeah.
That's one reason I don't even care. I don't care. I really don't care to have a television because I get bored really fast when I'm watching a TV show. I get really bored and I can't sit through a 1 hour television show. It's very difficult for me. I'm with you. Yeah, I can sit through hours of reading, but I cannot sit through most television shows. I just get super bored.
Gabriel, I disagree. I thought The Twilight Zone was excellent. He's also written for stage plays, Beauty and the Beast. This is where he met Roy Detroit, who did the famous and now infamous audiobooks that people now hate. But I would say that he was on some pretty good shows. I mean,
what was the show where the guy turned into a beast thing? What was that show? He wrote on that, didn't he? I can't remember the name.
I feel like AP will know. AP's
AP knows everything.
He does know everything. Also, he said that I canceled Gurm. How dare he? Austin said, if Gurm isn't your favorite author, who is? If not that, what is your second favorite? If people in the conversation would be like David Mitchell, Kazuo Ishiguro, Erickson.
Was it Beastmaster? What the heck was that show? Oh, he's written in a lot of shows.
Yeah, he's done a lot of work on, and also probably plenty of work that isn't public knowledge, I would imagine. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, McScarfield said Gurm also did a modern version of Beauty and the Beast TV show with Ron Perlman. I think that might be where he met Roy. I think.
Okay. In the 80s, how about that? Okay,
Manimal.
So I knew Twilight
Is it
Zone,
Manimal?
I thought he worked on. Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
He has a pretty long credit list. It's hard for me to remember all of them, but I did know the Beauty and the Beast thing. Obviously, the Twilight Zone's a really big one.
Okay.
And then decades of other fiction that he's written that I think is pretty excellent. Dub64 says, booktubers explain why a book didn't work for them. They don't hate on others for not agreeing with them. That's a key difference. Not all. Not all of them, but the good ones, I would agree, Dubs do.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Mitch is showing some love for the Thousand Worlds. I would agree. Very, very good stuff. Is there something that you've been seeing or maybe not seeing in fantasy that you would like to see more of? I mean, it could be anything. It could be from a writing perspective. It could be from people stop naming this of this. Uh, like anything, like stuff that you would like to see more of, or maybe not see anymore as well.
Well, I don't know. Like we said earlier, the trends come and go, and I hope there's a place for epic fantasy in the future, and I don't see it disappearing. I do feel that we've been through a period with traditional publishing becoming less likely to take on epic fantasy and being more likely to take on whatever the latest thing is, whether it was cozy fantasy or romantasy or what have you. And those things will always happen too. And there will always be a place for those. But for me, my wheelhouse is epic fantasy. And I want to see it healthy. I want to see it alive. I want to see it thriving and embraced. But yeah, it's not that there's no epic fantasy being published by traditional publishing at the moment. You can point to, John Gwynne is still being published, and he's writing epic fantasy, and several others. But I don't know how many new authors are breaking in as epic fantasy authors. So there's that. Of course, if George R. R. Martin would publish Winds of Winter, it would be a huge hit right away. Obviously, it would take off.
We
like
need
crazy.
more of this.
Yeah. I mean, the epic fantasy would be back, if Winds of Winter would come out, I think. But yeah, that's where my heart is, and I want to see it doing well, and people engaging with it and loving it, and getting love as a genre from the publishers too. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love a good epic fantasy. Gabriel said, "Nope, Jimmy is wrong. Wrong about what? That Twilight Zone was good? It's just my opinion, bro. It's just my opinion." So you know what's funny? I'm the exact opposite of you, Philip. I would love to see more trimmed down books. I would love to see maybe the 200-page, like really, really intentional use of language for world building and letting me fill in the blanks. Now, this is extremely tailored to my experience, by the way. So like, I'm not saying everyone needs to do this, but for me personally, selfishly, I would like to just see people try a little harder to be economical with their words and to be able to get a lot out of a little. I actually think Wizard of Earthsea is a great example.
I was just going to say the Earthsea books. Funny you should say that, because my sequel that I'm working on, While Darkness Gathers, is 91,000 words. So yeah.
Philip, I like
it's
where you're going.
my little experiment in streamlining my storytelling. So yeah, I guess I'm listening, Jimmy.
I'm glad. I think that also it's just a little bit of an easier buy-in for an audience. Like, I wonder how much, and I don't know this because I don't work with publishers. I don't know any publicist or anybody that's working in the business really, but I wonder how many authors are shooting themselves in the foot going to the traditional route with these series. Like, or is that just what they want? Like, how many? I think of a lot of the older authors who did do like little things, like even someone like Moorcock who did serialized stories for a good amount of time, like how much that would build into something bigger later down the road.
Yeah. I think the biggest period for the bloat maybe was the 80s, the 90s, and that maybe even into the early 2000s. But since then, like, you think of bloat's a bad word, but people did love, Wheel of Time is, coming out in the 90s. And it's, in terms of word count, maybe the longest. I don't know. Realm of the Elderlings, of course, certainly from the same era. Yeah. Same era. Of course, you could divide Realm of the Elderlings into its individual, trilogies if you want.
Yeah.
But that sort of thing. I don't know anybody there's somebody in the chat will mention, I'm sure. But is there anyone now writing a more than 10 book, with each book being 1,000 pages?
Just Tad Williams. Just Tad. Just laying in bed thinking of his stories. That's what he told me. That's where he does his plotting. He just lays down.
Wow.
Okay. I know. Yeah. I said I'd fall asleep.
Yeah.
Hey Gabriel, thank you for the 10 spot. He said long live difference of opinion. Thank you, Gabriel. I'm always down for a difference of opinions, and that is very, very kind of you. So thank you.
Super cool. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I guess I hear the calls for more epic fantasy. I'm down. I love a good series and such. But wouldn't it be amazing to see things that maybe could achieve, like, here's a question, Philip. Does an epic fantasy book necessarily have to be 750 pages, 1,000
No,
pages? Like,
no, not at all.
yeah.
It works much shorter. Like you mentioned, Le Guin. I mean, there's plenty of examples of epic fantasy that is a lot shorter and more concise. And it is. I mean, you talked about short stories earlier, and I think short stories are actually harder to write in many ways than a novel because you have to be so much more economical. You know what I mean?
I think
Whereas with
that's
a
why
novel,
Erickson's so good, though. And also, I would say Ken Liu as well.
well, they both studied short stories they through and through before writing their novels, and I mean, in many ways you're
George as
absolutely
well.
right. Yeah, so there is something to that, but I think for honing your craft, working on the short story is a great idea, and especially if you're interested in writing one that's going to be concise and tight and economical. That's great. That's awesome. But yeah, I don't see anybody like Robert Jordan or even who's taking up the baton
I
from
mean,
George R. R. Martin.
it's Ryan Cahill, I would say.
Oh, there you go.
But as
But
someone,
he started out self-publishing, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and is doing well. Let's be clear, doing very
very well.
well. I don't like the series personally. I wish I did, Phil. I would love to. I would love to.
You probably would have loved it like 4 years ago. I'm guessing.
You think?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
You know what? Possible. It's definitely possible. I think if someone's getting back into fantasy, actually pretty good recommendation, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe even for a first one.
I don't know how
this
far you
is 50%, 55% through book 2.
got. Okay. All right. So you didn't read his best work then. The third full-length book is his best work, in my opinion.
Yeah, but Philip, that's like 2,000 pages later.
I know they're thick, but I thought it was great. I enjoyed the obvious, being rooted in a lot of the tropes. And for me, trope is never a bad word automatically. It's just a tool. And definitely you could feel the love for the tropes in there and particular series being an influence. But he gets away from that by the second book, and he's really doing his own thing and doing some really good work with his characters by that third full-length book. It's some really nice quiet moments to go along with the epic stuff, with the battles and all of that. So you can see him growing as a writer, and I actually kind of enjoyed that too, to read a writer's books and see them get better as they progress in a series. So
yeah, I do think there's something about being like on a journey with an author who's growing and stuff. I'm totally cool with that. But I actually, Cahill would be the exact example I'm thinking about of some, like, what if that book was economical in any man? And I'm not saying cut a bunch of stuff, but like there's almost always a way of like reforming your words to make it more brief. But also with that, a lot of times it's going to require a lot more from the reader to fill in gaps and things like that. And we certainly are not in an era where that's marketable, to put it plainly. It's for instance, in my writing class, it was like, hey, you want to sell a book? You better write it at a 5th grade level. Like that kind of
that's
attitude.
scary. Yeah. I mean, you've heard the statistics about the average literacy level and the fact that a majority of adult Americans can't read above a 6th grade level. And in fact, 21% of adult Americans are functionally illiterate even. So it's actually terrifying.
Wild.
How did we get there? I think it's 54%. 54% cannot read above a 6th grade level. Yeah,
and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. It's
probably going to get worse.
It's definitely it's without a doubt going to get worse. I'm trying to be an optimist here. It's without a doubt going to get worse. I also would like to say I am not in the majority of saying that I would like books to be like even smaller. Actually, I think a lot of people like big books. Like Amanda was saying above, she was saying that like fan fiction readers will read 600,000 page fanfic. Like people will read things that they love. I mean that and there's nothing wrong with that at all. There was some recommendations here. I guess I'll highlight them since I'm complaining about length of book. Benjamin says Jacqueline Carey's standalone epic fantasy Starless is under 600 pages. And then Daniel Kloster says the Sacred Throne series by Mike. Is that Mike? Yeah, Mike Cole is a super short epic fantasy series. Each book in the trilogy is like 200 pages. And then Tom Orange says The Crown of Ishia, the first book is 150 pages and has dragons, which
cool.
That's all you need, honestly. That'll sell at least 10,000 copies, I think, if you just have a dragon even on the cover. Mick Scarfield, our good friend, of course, says, I am repeating from a previous comment, but Paul Anderson is surprisingly epic for how short his books are. Gabriel says David Anthony Durham, which is actually someone I'm not familiar with, but I like that his name is Dad if you take all of his initials. It's kind of funny. I wanted to highlight this because I actually see this a lot. Cooper Scroggin says, I don't think publishers want to take on a risk by another massively epic saga. They've been burned too hard by Gurm for not writing. I see this about Gurm, Scott Lynch, and Patrick Rothfuss, but you have to realize how much money they made off this series, whether or not it's finished. In fact, they would love to have it, and I'm sure the people working there now are probably like, please give it to us. I actually don't think that this is a factor because I would put good money down that Patrick Rothfuss probably is still propping up DAW.
Wow. Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, he sold a lot of books. And as far as George goes, I mean, he probably... So here's one thing that I've learned recently is that you have your Fourth Wings, you have your Song of Ice, you have your big hitters, right? These things that explode. Those subsidize a bunch of other series to be started because then they can take that money and take a risk on things. So George not only made them a ton of money, but also allowed them to probably find other series that have been marginally successful. For instance, First Law comes to mind for sure. I'm sure that there's a pipeline there somewhere. But I do not think publishers are like, man, if we know George wasn't going to write the ending, we would have never sold his books. Like that is not real. I just don't think that that's how that goes.
Yeah, you actually make a great point there. I do feel that, and this I could be wrong. I will admit I'm no insider in the publishing industry, but my perception is that it feels like they are taking fewer of those risks than they used to.
Well, they're making less money.
Yeah, and that's why. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Their industry has been absolutely scoured by the changes in the world, the internet, and it's just turned things upside down for them. And they're still trying to put out good stories, but there is an economic factor here, and they have to be profitable to keep themselves employed. So there are, I feel like, much less likely to take those risks on the new people. They're really looking for a sure bet in a known author or in a formula that has worked a couple times on a big scale. And anything outside of that is just, they're not really going to touch it. It feels like. So.
Yeah. And to be clear, like we needed the Fourth Wings. I know people don't like to hear that, but like the industry needs them. The industry, like to have a place to go publish a book. AP says shorter books, fewer pages, are cheaper to produce, and perhaps more importantly, greater numbers of them can be stacked on a bookshelf. A weirdly mundane reason for publishers to favor lower page counts. Yeah, I mean, we've all heard the kind of restraints, right? Like, don't submit a manuscript over 120,000 words. Don't do this and don't do that. And it sucks because sometimes you do need more pages, right? Like, I don't know if, for instance, like Robert Jordan wrote a bazillion words in Shadow Rising, but I'm pretty sure he had to write it that way for his story to work the way it did. I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, for his story. Yeah. The way he wanted to tell it, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad I see people still excited for the Night of the Seven Kingdoms TV show. I'm very, very excited. When I was in Ireland, they had been filming there in the exact place I was standing like a week prior, which was really, really cool.
Wow, it's standing in the shadow of Dunk and Egg.
Yes, I was in the shadow of Dunk the Tall, Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall. My favorite.
Yeah. Wow.
Man, I love it.
Very cool. I enjoyed those a lot. Those are great stories.
Yeah, absolutely. This is crazy if this is true. Samwise says someone said that Rothfuss and Tad provide over 50% of DAW's revenue.
Wow.
If that's true, that is a crazy stat.
Yeah.
Crazy stat. because if you go look at Tad's like latest book and you look at ratings, the drop off from To Green Angel Tower to his new stuff is like monumental drop off. Like it's a crazy thing. Usually you see that between book 1 and 2. All Memory Star and Thorn has tons of ratings online. And
Right.
then the new stuff he's done, which I think is actually better. It's just people did not continue for whatever reason. I don't know if that's maybe that's a temperature check of readership, or maybe just people being online. I'm not sure. It's hard to say.
Well, there was a gap between him returning to Austin Ard, right? I mean,
There was. Yes, he wrote plenty of other stuff, yeah.
which, obviously hindsight and all that, but that may be a reason why it was too much of a cooling off period after the initial trilogy, or really tetralogy. Yeah, it's maybe. I mean, I'm just throwing out that possibility, I guess. But he's a writer who likes to experiment and go to different genres and that sort of thing, and that doesn't necessarily work in a commercial sense, right? Because
yeah,
publishers like you to be labeled, oh, he's the epic fantasy author. When you say, I want to write a space science fiction, whatever, that's almost like starting over in a way.
I've heard this from friends who are in the publishing industry right now, thinking of other projects they want to work on that is not aligned with what they're working on now, and they're like, yeah, it's like a whole nother, it's basically going in blind again almost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's too bad, but again, we're in this climate where they're just less likely to take risks, and it's not really entirely their fault. So
yeah, Cooper says, I remember there was an anecdote that from Rothfuss editor that DOW almost went bankrupt because he didn't submit a manuscript. That might actually say more about DAW than it does Rothfuss, unfortunately. DAW has so many authors that I really like, and for some reason, anything else, I don't know, maybe I should pick up more stuff from their catalog, but I never see them. It's always Tor and Orbit. That's all I ever see anymore. I did have Lies of Descent by Tracy Russell Butcher, I think. I haven't read it, but I did pick it up because I thought it sounded kind of cool.
Yeah. It feels like Tor and Orbit are definitely more in the public sphere, at least. It does feel like they have more momentum. I have no idea what the actual sales numbers are, though, for these different companies.
Yeah, not really able to know until when the acquisition thing was going through a few years ago. We started to learn a lot about how many books that go published don't even sell triple digits. I mean, that's a crazy thing.
Yeah, well, the vast majority don't, actually. I mean, most traditionally published books die on the vine. They wither on the vine because again, this is the economics of it, I guess, but the publishers are only going to back a few, and they're only going to back the ones that are succeeding, and they're going to let the rest of them just die. And I've heard all kinds of horror stories about authors who have succeeded, have gotten that far in publishing with a traditional publisher, but then it's not one of those that gets backed up really, and no one ever hears about their book, and they can't even get the rights back to self-publish it or something like that.
It's tough. It's tough because it's all in the name of a quick buck. The whole thing is about a quick buck.
Yeah.
It's what I'm
unfortunately
fighting right now in my job that is not writing. It's just like everything's about like short terms, wanting to impress whoever, and it's like that's not how you build good businesses. That is just simply not the way to go. There's no sustainability to it.
It's not long-term thinking. It's short-term thinking. And to my mind, if you want a strong company, you need to invest in your employees and treat them well. And that loyalty is something that they will return to you. Mm-hmm. But that's not where we are. That's not the model, is it? No.
Yeah. And this is obviously reaching way past publishing at that point. I mean, it's a systemic problem. Systemic problem. Jimmy and Philip, do you read or hear much about Baen books as a publisher? I mean, I knew Rakia was with him, and then I checked out some other stuff. Honestly, nobody else other than Rakia really jumped out to me. Like, I'm not interested in many of the other authors, so I haven't read a bunch from Baen, to be honest.
I don't pay much attention, to be honest with you, who the publisher is. I should pay more attention, really. But yeah, it's not something I think about a lot. And keep in mind that all these publishers we're talking about, they're all owned by somebody bigger.
Oh
There are
yeah,
four or five companies that really essentially own all of these. Now, they may have a degree of independence in the way they do things. And I honestly don't know how much do they simply just report to the bigger company a couple times a year and say, here's how we're doing, and then get a pat on the head, or how much control is there from the bigger company? I have no idea. I have no
a lot of these
information.
things are fractured as well. Like even imprints within a publisher, it's all very odd. And they're in teams, and they're actually competitive with each other within the company, from what I understand, which is something I
Oh, I
never
bet.
knew. I never thought of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I bet they're competing. Absolutely. The smaller imprints within the bigger parent company are probably more like what are those birds that were the babies, like they kill each other, so the last one is the only one alive. They're like that.
Where are our bird experts? Someone tell us what bird
Cuckoos,
that
are they
is.
cuckoos that do that? Wait, what are the birds
The
that
cuckoos?
I don't know.
I don't
I have no
know.
idea.
I'm not sure.
I was
Uh,
trying to give a good analogy there, but
People are asking if we're excited about the new Dresden book. I didn't even know he finished the new Dresden book. Like, is it have a publication date? Are you caught up?
no, I've only
Okay.
read 7 Dresden Files. I have not caught that fever
Me
yet
either.
with Dresden, where I believe the fans who they get to a certain point in the series, and it just sweeps them away, and they can't stop reading. And I'd love to experience that. I just haven't gotten that yet. I did really enjoy Deadbeat. That's the last one I read. That's book 7, I think. So yeah, I like the Dresden books, but I haven't really caught that fever yet. I don't know how you feel about Dresden.
That's pretty much the exact same. I think the last one I read was White Knight or something, and I
Oh,
really
so you're
did.
further back than I am.
Yeah, and I did not like. Actually, it was my favorite. I don't know if it was White Knight or not. I don't want to misspeak, but I read one of whatever the last one I read. I really enjoyed it a lot. I was like, this is the first Dresden book I'm gonna love. And then I really did not like the ending at all, and I have not read it since. I actually will probably do it at one point because I think they're fairly easy to read, and I do think Butcher's a really talented writer. Like I think he does the best openings of anyone I've ever read. I think
Yes.
his hooks are just too good, man. They're so good.
Yeah, what was it? I think it's Grave Peril with the car scene in the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
that is just a great opener, I must say, and it introduces a new character that I immediately liked a lot. And I won't say the name in case somebody thinks that's spoilery or whatever, but if you know, you know. But yeah, it's just a great introduction to that book. Great scene. There is a fantastic scene in book 7 in Deadbeat. My favorite scene in Dresden so far, actually, which I can't. Again, I'm not going to give details, but it's a fun scene. It's a really fun scene, and that's what Butcher does really well. He does the fun stuff, I think.
Yeah, he does, and like I said, he has a pretty good talent, especially for character voice. I will
Yep.
not be caught up by the time this book comes out. There's literally not a chance. I'm sure you're the same way. There's like
Same,
no way.
same.
Just too many
Yeah.
books, too many pages to read. Um, if someone were to come to you, Philip, and say, "I want to be a better reader," what would be your number one tip for someone?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is to read broadly. So, as much as I love fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to read outside of fantasy, and that includes nonfiction, by the way. So, yeah, read other genres, read from other eras, read books from other cultures and other countries in translation if necessary, but just read broadly. I think that's how you do it, and that's really important advice, especially for not just being a better reader, but if you're interested in writing.
For sure.
If you want to bring something different, let's put it this way: if you want to be a fantasy writer and all you ever read is fantasy, you're not going to bring anything different to the genre, are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Whereas if you read a lot of, let's say, nonfiction, and you may bring something unique to the genre, or you read a lot from some other time period or culture, then yeah, you're going to have something interesting to bring to the game, I think.
I like that a lot. I think that's something that you can see, like, for instance, in Erickson's work. I think you can see that he had a
For
wide
sure.
range.
For sure.
A lot of the last 2 years for me has been reading widely and reading outside of the genre and
I've
coming back.
noticed that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it, dude. I mean, there's so many times that I want to read a book that is just more grounded and also shorter. It's like, wait, and then taking that and coming back. Sometimes you can catch authors in the fantasy genre, and you're like, I know where you got that from. It wasn't from Lord of the Rings, but you were over here in this other genre dabbling. I can tell, and that's kind of cool because just like fantasy has its own like, um, I don't want to say guidelines or guardrails, but fantasy has things about it that make it a strengths, right? For instance, I would say that there's a decent more amount of like world building exposition, right, in a fantasy book, and then
Yes.
I would even say telling over showing sometimes is the correct answer in fantasy. Maybe in all books, actually. I think that that's a rule that can be flip flopped quite a bit.
Agreed.
It's
Agreed.
more of a guideline rather than a rule, I think. But
Yeah.
you can get away with a lot more, like you said, Baker, like getting away with a lot more exposition. I was reading Midnight Tides as a standalone as a reread, because
Cool.
the more I think about this book, I'm like, is Midnight Tides my favorite Malazan book? I was like, I should read it. So I'm reading it very slow. It'll probably take me months to get through it. But even here, like there was a ton of history that Troll Singar is thinking about. And I was like, man, I feel like in another genre, that would just be X'd with a red pen. Like they'd be like, get this out of here. They're like, why would he be thinking about this type of thing? Uh, we, of course, by the end of the book, know all of that context matters very, very much, and also says a lot about trolls. So it's not useless. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying like maybe in a different genre, he wouldn't be afforded this kind of length or whatever. So there's strengths to everything, and then you can start to see the mechanics of like noir, right, of crime or thriller or whatever else it might be. And I think that
Right.
that stuff is pretty great.
I absolutely agreed. And just sometimes somebody hits the right kind of slight innovation. For example, Harry Potter was a huge phenomenon.
Yeah.
There was really not much new except the combination of things that J.K. Rowling did. Obviously, fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously some mystery in there, but also just the boarding school novel, which is not really a thing here in the States, but over in the old world, over in Europe or in England and in the UK and whatnot. A lot of it's a whole genre. It's a whole genre of books, and she took that and kind of just had this great combination of
Yeah.
fantasy and boarding school novel and mystery, and it really worked. It's a hodgepodge that just happened to be right place, right time. Brilliant.
That is so true, Philip. So many things that end up blowing up and people go, why did people like this? This sucks. So much of that is because they found the right pieces to fit together at the exact right time. And
Right.
maybe it's average or even below average at all the pieces that it's combining, but it's just the right recipe. And you're like this. You ever been broke, Philip, and just went through your cabinet and just thrown a bunch of stuff in a pot and made it? Like I remember those days. And sometimes you're like, hey, this ain't half bad. Like no one else would eat this, but for me right now, this is pretty good. Like that can happen. And I think people undervalue it a bit. And Amanda's highlighting, this is something Carlos from StoryTube was talking about the other day, and I agree, is like Greenbone Saga was such a hit because it's The Godfather.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
I also know that that's one of the reasons why some people don't like it, because they watch The Godfather and they're like, what the, this is just The Godfather. Like this is just, but it does make sense, taking that and then putting a fantasy spin on it. Obviously the heist format being thrown into fantasy with Mistborn is something that Sanderson talks about quite a bit. And we could probably think of a million other things, but
Scott Lynch's, Lies of Locke Lamora, it's Ocean's 11 meets Renaissance Italy meets fantasy, yeah.
Yes. And I think that is a huge piece of that you can go for if you're looking for success in fantasy or whatever genre. It doesn't actually matter. Maybe fantasy, you get away with it a little bit more because you can make it work any which way. And you can also disguise it if you try really hard, because it could be in a secondary world and all of these other things. Yeah.
Especially now. I would say especially now. It's something that
Yeah.
you could do even more now than ever before in fantasy.
Yeah. AP actually is in the chat. He said, Philip, Harry Potter didn't invent that combination. The Worst Witch series did it before Potter. I've never heard of a series.
And why don't we know about the timing? You know, why don't we know about Worst Witch? And we know about Harry Potter. It's just maybe a matter of timing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so obviously some people know it, but that's I never heard of it, but I do believe AP. Yeah,
AP knows his stuff. He's been around for a minute. He's read a lot of books.
I've
Uh,
read a few. Read a few.
I'm reading a book right now that I'm loving, and it's called The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which, by the way,
Ah,
I had no idea he was so popular.
I've heard that name a lot in the
He has
last couple
sold
of years.
a good amount of books, and like his
Yeah.
Goodreads ratings were way higher than I thought they would be. Like I was
Mm.
very shocked, to be honest. The Tainted Cup has a whole bunch of Attack on Titan influence, talking about
Uh-huh.
combining pieces. So I'm not, Philip, I don't even know if I can actually claim that like this is excellent, but I don't know yet because I haven't finished it. But like I'm just riding high on the combination of things that he's done. And I think that kind of shows the power of that. Because for me right now, my analytical brain's almost turned off when I'm reading it. Like I'm just devouring it. Like I'm in love. I love it.
Wow. Wow. Well, I've heard a lot of praise for it in the last. I don't know when it came out, but
Apparently
I've
it
heard
was
other
all the
people.
way last year, and the next book's coming out in April. I didn't even know that the second book was coming out, so I'm actually in. I'll be done in time to read the second book, which is kind of exciting.
How long is the series?
I think it's supposed to be a trilogy. We all know how that usually turns out, but it's supposedly a trilogy. And the first book, I think, is only like 300 or 400 pages, which is awesome. Um,
Okay.
Very vivid descriptions, which I'm not the biggest fan of. Like I like them, but to a certain point, I'm like, okay, like I would like. So that's like been my only real critique so far. Um,
Huh.
but it's combining so many elements of Attack on Titan with like a really weird, like almost like flora magic, which is very strange. It's good. I think it's good at least. I think it's very entertaining. So when I finish it, I'll finish it by the mind wrap up next Friday, and then people will know if I stay loving it. But that is a good example for me about something that's being brought into fantasy. I've been saying for ever since I read Attack on Titan, I'm like, somebody do Attack on Titan in fantasy. Just take the elements of it and do it because I think it can be done even better in the right circumstances.
Wow. All right. Cool. Very cool. Well,
Yeah,
somebody listened to you there.
I'm very, very
Yeah.
excited about it. You talk about reading widely. I wanted to ask you, what's the last non fantasy book you read?
Oh well, I mean, I teach intro to lit, so I have to teach all kinds of non fantasy all the time, and I'm always reading non fantasy on my own. I have to think about that. Well, I read John Minton's book, which is a cosmic horror book. So that's pretty recent too. That was like the last book I finished, even. I think that's true. Yes, that's the last book I finished before I started Baker's. So it's called Discovery,
Mm-hmm.
and it's cosmic horror. It's got it's Lovecraftian in a way, but much more in a modern way. It's set in the 90s, and it's for me. I kept thinking of a Quentin Tarantino film as I was reading the dialogue.
Oh,
It's fun. It's a really fun book. Yeah, you guys. I think a lot of people are going to love this book when it's out. May 15, I think, is when it comes out. So if you're not familiar with the Mintons, their channel is called Talking Story, and it's John and Amy and Jacob, and let's not forget Mr. Pooh, who is he's very important. Mr. Pooh, we all love Mr. Pooh. He's a pug if you're not familiar,
yeah,
but
very
yeah,
adorable.
he's adorable. But their book is actually quite excellent. I was actually surprised at how mature it feels. Like they've been writing books for a long time, and
Mm.
it's just a really strong dialogue, very well executed book. I think people are going to love it. So yeah, that's the last non fantasy was just my last review actually. Yeah.
Excellent. I was kind of assuming it would be in the realm of fantasy, but I've been hearing that it's kind of a mishmash of a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
seems to do it all pretty well. Samwise wants to know though, can you confirm for everyone how much Jacob Minton paid you for this positive review and this ad time?
It wasn't Jacob, it was John. No.
It was a handsome sum. It was
Yeah. No. I mean, it's funny because when you are reading a friend's book, it is a bit nerve wracking because,
Oh yeah.
what if it sucks, and then what are you going to do? And then, it's a slightly awkward position to be in if you don't like the book that your friend wrote. But fortunately, I was not put in any kind of awkward position because I actually loved it, and it was easy to talk about it. So I was very happy to review that book, and I think once people read it, they're gonna see exactly what I'm saying. That it's really well done.
Yeah, I'm excited to give it a shot, and I know that Mrs. Minton is a huge fan of David Mitchell, and I know John is as well. But specifically,
Yeah.
believe they met him as well. And I love David Mitchell. I read 2 David Mitchell novels this month, and I'm just
So
like,
there you go.
I'm full
Yeah.
in. I'm just full in on it. So anybody who has that much respect for David Mitchell is going to get at least a peek for me, from my prestigious eyes. Make myself seem very, very important. I think I'm going to like it. I'm hoping I do. I don't want to crush John's dreams, but I will read it and pick it up in May whenever it comes out. What would you say is your favorite non-fantasy book? Like, do you have maybe even a few that you would put up there?
So I can't include Beowulf, I guess. 'Cause
No,
I just said
you're not
earlier-
including Beowulf, Philip. Stop it. God.
I don't know. I have to think about that. I mean, there's just a lot of writers that I love, and in terms of medieval literature, I'm a huge fan of things I don't talk about as much, but I love the Canterbury Tales. I think that Chaucer was brilliant.
They're not finished though, right?
It's unfinished. Yes.
Can't read it then. Means it sucks, right?
Right. Yes. That's so funny. Yeah. I mean, talk about. I mean, Gurm looks like he makes Gurm look good, Geoffrey Chaucer, because he was going to write like 100 tales and he only wrote a handful, really. So yeah. But yeah, no, I love that stuff. But in terms of more modern stuff, some stuff that might surprise people, I'm a big fan of some of the modern stuff. I had spent a lot of time reading a lot of 19th century, Victorian especially, novels, and I loved some by George Eliot, for example. I think was a brilliant writer, and also Thomas Hardy. I enjoyed a lot. His books are kind of depressing. You probably would like them, Jimmy.
Which one should I start with?
Far from the Madding Crowd, maybe, or Test of the D'Urbervilles. I guess those two would probably be.
Far from the Madding Crowd. Okay.
Far from the Madding Crowd, Gabriel Oak, Farmer Oak. Yeah, you probably would like Thomas Hardy. Actually, I think your temperament would fit well with him. I think. And
should I be insulted?
No.
Okay.
I think you'll see that I've given you a big compliment. I mean, he's one of my favorite writers. So yeah.
He's out of print?
What? No, come on. That has to be Far from the Madding Crowd has to be in print somewhere.
No, it's not. Oh, wait, here it is. I have to get it in hardcover? Oh, Philip.
I'll give you a copy. I have a copy of it.
It'll be here tomorrow. I ordered it.
Oh, okay. All right. Test of the D'Urbervilles also, it's real tragic stuff, but that's probably his most famous, actually, is Tess. But yeah, I don't know. I like a lot of stuff. I like to read broadly and eclectically, and I like to read nonfiction and stuff like that too. So, but in terms of just novels, there are certain eras that I seem to vibe with. I love the medieval stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I really love the 19th century, both the Romantic and the Victorian periods. And a lot of some of the early 20th century stuff I actually like. Like I like the experimentalism of Virginia Woolf. I'm a big fan of Mrs. Dalloway, for example. I think that was a profound experience for me reading a couple of her books. The Waves, I think, was the other one I read, and Mrs. Dalloway. So yeah, there's that. But then there are certain eras where I find they're less to my taste. I find the 18th century to be pretty boring, actually.
Sorry to all the 18th century folks out there. I know they're big fans of the channel. Philip didn't mean it.
Yeah. Yeah, 18th century. Sorry, not my thing. The 15th century too is a pretty dry era for literature, and that's interesting because in history, of course, that's Wars of the Roses and all that, right? But there's not a lot of great literature that comes out of the 15th century. I'm afraid they're just too busy killing each other. So
As one does, right? As one
yeah,
does.
yeah. So yeah, no, I'd have to think really hard about that. I have read quite a fair amount. I can't say I'm really well read, but I've read some Tolstoy, and I read Crime and Punishment. Had a big effect on me when I read that when I was young. I read Boris Pasternak. Yeah, I've read a few. And I used to teach some Tolstoy short stories. Yeah,
Hell
tell me
yeah.
about it, Brian. Tell me about it.
Have you ever read the
There's
Coupon by Leo Tolstoy?
the what?
The Coupon?
No, I haven't read that one.
It's a good one. I highly
Okay.
suggest it. Highly suggest it. I love Tolstoy's short stories.
Well, I know you had the death of Ivan Ilyich had a big effect on you.
Right. That's like one of the best things ever written, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I love it.
I used to teach that one. That's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of Chekhov recently just because I was writing short stories, wanted to ingest
Oh yeah,
more.
good one. Good model. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever write short stories? I don't know if I've ever asked you this.
I have written a few. Before I started writing my novels, I wrote a few short stories that I'll probably keep in my drawer forever. They're actually kind of I could describe them actually. One was set in Kathmandu and involves a kind of, I would describe it as kind of magic realism, I guess.
Okay.
But it involves a naga, if you know what that is. So a snake person, I guess. But it's modern Kathmandu. So I think it's a kind of an environmental story, I guess. And then I wrote one set in Vermont. Shocking, right? Actually set in the state park where once upon a time I worked as a park ranger. So yeah.
So you and I both are writing about jobs that we had.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, you got to write what you know, man. Right?
I feel like everyone returns home in one way or another in their writing. Maybe that's wrong, but I know I have, whether it be just in thought patterns or actual physically back to like my first job.
Yeah. So there was in this state park where I worked, which is now actually, so there used to be a town in a valley. But at one point they flooded this valley in order to make a reservoir. And so the town had to be abandoned, but there is underwater, there are the remnants of this town. And on the hillsides, there are some of the more remote homes. They're mostly just ruins now, mostly like cellar holes and stuff. And there was something happened there. It's been years since I read the newspaper story, but back in the day, back in like the 19th century, there was a murder that took place in this town. And so I used that. It was a domestic thing. It was a very tragic story involving the death of a child. But I used that in the short story that I wrote. Yeah, it's kind of a haunted place.
That's really interesting. Almost some I'm going to butcher it, but Corrald Emmerlane, Memories of Ice.
Yeah.
Kind of vibe from Malazan. That's what I was thinking of the whole time.
Sure.
That's some crazy history. I mean, obviously I would not know because I'm not from Vermont, but yeah, that's pretty haunted.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, Vermont is you could get some good Gothic stuff going in a Vermont setting.
Sure. Anywhere up there, really, in the Northeast. Maine is famously creepy, and King is all types of messed up from growing up there, obviously. So.
Yep. Yeah, I live in New Jersey now too, and there's a whole like weird New Jersey like tradition, like people going to like haunted houses and stuff like that. So.
Oh yeah, West Virginia has its own mythos, and Appalachian mythos as well, obviously. But like Mothman, there's weird stuff like that all throughout America, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I think there's potential for stories there for sure.
Yeah, I love the idea of that Vermont town. That's sticking with me though. You should You should revisit that, Philip. I would really like to read something about that.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the Little River State Park. If anyone's curious,
Little River State Park. I'm going to write it down.
Yeah. I worked there back in the day, back in the early 90s. So
I think that's when I was born.
yeah.
Now, before we went live, you also told me that you used to work at Denny's.
I had a job at Denny's when I was 17, working the graveyard shift from midnight to 8 a.m., washing dishes and bussing tables. It was the worst job I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. Why?
I had to make money to go to college.
No, why was it the worst job?
Oh, why was it the worst job? Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to bike there, and because I didn't have a car, so I had to bike there, and it wasn't in a nice area. It was in a lot of traffic and stuff. So you're biking to work at midnight, and when you get there, you're washing the filthy, disgusting, dishes from the crowds. I mean, there's no place busier at 3 a.m. on a Saturday than Denny's, trust me. And the stuff that goes down there is pretty scary. Kind of like your job that you were telling me about, where you saw we're talking about drug deals and all kinds of just really scuzzy stuff going on all over the place. So, yeah.
Any fights? Were there any Denny's fights?
None that I had to do anything about because I was, washing dishes and stuff. But yeah, there were a couple, things that broke out. But,
I was thinking maybe a grand sandwich to the face,
Yeah.
See what I did there? Yeah. That was good.
Yeah. But I did not have a homeless person living in the over the ceiling at the Denny's where I worked, unlike your workplace.
Dude, working at a truck stop was one of the most frightening experiences. I say very sheltered, very religious, 18-year-old that got left in the dust. All of his friends went to college, and I guess I'll work at my hometown truck stop. And looking back on it, I'm like, this is going to make for some pretty good writing material. So that's where I got the idea for the Diesel Clerk Chronicle. And I'm just going to, I don't know what it's going to be yet, but there's a lot of really insane stuff that people will not, will not believe, which they don't have to, because it's going to be fiction. I'm going to throw in some other stuff there, but.
Are you going to make it fantasy at all? Like urban fantasy or something?
No, I don't think so. I did play around with the idea of making it a little bit of a mystery, because there actually were two mysteries happening whenever I worked there. And one was who was stealing the cigarettes, because our counts were always off. It was a huge deal. Like, I don't know why I cared at the time. I was getting paid $6.50 an hour or something. But I was invested. I was like, we got to find out who's stealing money out of our pockets, guys. I was 18 and virtuous. But the other mystery is that there were bloody clothes that kept being found around the truck stop. And then there was this almost like an urban legend in the town that there was a serial killer at the truck stop. But you would just find bloody clothes. You never find any bodies or anything. You just find bloody clothes once a month. It was very strange.
Oh,
and then the mystery of where stuff was going missing and coming from. And then we found out from the security cameras that a homeless guy was living in the ceiling, which was, he was coming out of the ceiling and going into the showers the truckers use. Insane. So there's some mysteries there, those could be three separate little arcs for a serial story. But I think that place is responsible, one, for my work ethic, because it was the hardest job I ever had. And two, I think gave me a pretty good idea of one, maybe how to talk to people, but also just how complicated people can be. That place is awful, but my God, it definitely shaped me a good amount. I was there for 10 to 11 months, and it was wild. How long did you work at Denny's?
In my case, it was just 3 months, I think.
Oh, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Yeah.
But it was full time. And like you said, though, these are the kinds of jobs that you look back and you think, well, that was motivating, So, yeah.
AP said, once Jimmy stopped working there, the clothes stopped appearing. It was never solved. Oh, Rodrigo said, I already want to read how you would connect all three of those things. I mean, honestly, the cigarette one is the most interesting because it actually has a resolution and you would never see it coming. it's pretty wild. So it's I was telling you before we went live, Philip, it's just interesting how much fantasy I love, but you know, my short fiction hasn't really leaned heavy into fantasy yet. I'm kind of writing. I'm not right when I say this, but for me, like personally, I find it easier to not write fantasy because I think getting someone to believe in your world is so difficult to do.
That's true. You know, but in the short story that I read recently, there's a suggestion, let's say, that
Yes.
could be something fantastical, but it's ambiguous. So I like that. I like how you left the ambiguity there. That was well done.
Yeah, and that was actually very intentional. One, I wanted to avoid biases from people in the class or anything. Like I kind of wanted to write something that would work for anybody of any, you know, whatever genre they favored. But I also do have ideas of like how to expand that out, and it could go into a fantasy, it could go into historical fiction, it could go into a post-apocalyptic thing, which is probably the one I would rather do, because that's kind of my jam. But yeah, I just I find it challenging to believe in a secondary world myself. Like I read a lot of books where it feels just something on stilts. Does that make sense? It's not a flushed out Westeros, right, or Randland or Middle Earth. Like the reason why I remember those names is because they're monumental.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking before about, you know, the length. Hey, Bookborn, good to see you. You were talking before about the length and the idea that you might like some shorter, you know, epic fantasy, for example. And
Yeah,
that all checks out with what you were saying. Yeah, a lifeguard. Yeah, I could see Tom doing that for sure.
that sounds like
Being
too
a
much
lifeguard.
responsibility, actually.
You think?
Philip, I appreciate you giving me a good chunk of your time on a Friday night. As somebody who's been on the channel multiple times, many times at this point, I think you really are the number 2 most attended guest. It's either you, Joanna, or Bookborn. I just got to thank you for always bringing something to the table. You always are, to me, very entertaining, but also enlightening as well. I think everyone always leaves with a little bit more knowledge than they had prior, and that's one of the best things about you. But you're also you just happen to be a pretty damn good guy overall. And you are my security blanket on Chatting with Nuts. Whenever I'm not sure, I'm like, I know I can count on you, and you've always answered the call. So I appreciate that about you, my friend.
I am happy to be in, and you know, a good security blanket is made out of tweed. You know that, right? So.
That was good. That was a great line. Do you have anything coming up that people can look forward to that's coming out on the channel here soon?
Well, I talked about the thing I was really excited to tell people about was that beautiful piece that Nikhil composed for me for the Adan trilogy. So I'm really just excited. I hope people will check that out. It's just it's under 4 minutes, guys. So not too much time there. But you could do it on his channel or mine now. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to Joanna about the Second Apocalypse series, and we'll see what sense we can make of all of it, if any. And yeah, I'm excited to be here really at all. And I thank you for being so gracious and asking me here. And I do apologize. I see that I've been getting fuzzy here on and off. I think is that I don't know how visually everyone's seeing me, but half the time I feel like I'm very blurry. But I don't know what's going on, if that's my internet or what. But hopefully you can hear me all right.
Oh yeah, your sound has been fine, which is all that matters. 99% of people just listen to us.
I mean, you don't have to see my ugly face this way anyway.
Oh, stop it. Oh, stop it. You're Chad, Philip. Everybody knows it. Look at that jawline.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, it's hiding under the beard. But anyway, thank you so much. I had a wonderful time chatting with you, as always. It's an honor to be on Chatting with Nuts. And thank you, everybody in the chat, for being here. And also, Team Replay, thank you for watching as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, drop a comment down below if you weren't able to get into the chat tonight. And if you have questions and stuff, I know Philip looks at all comments, and I know I still do too, which is my favorite thing about doing this. So we'd love to hear from you down below, and definitely go check out Philip's channel. I'm assuming you know of Philip and you probably are subscribed to him, but if you are not, and it's the first time checking him out, he I mean, he's one of the best. He's one of the best, and he's also just happens to be a stand-up guy. So, Philip, thanks again. I appreciate you being here. Chat, thank you for being here. We'll be back next Friday night for my wrap-up, right before I go in for some surgery on my face. Finally getting this growth cut out of my cheek, and then while they're in there, they're going to take out 2 wisdom teeth up here. So I'm going to be out of commission for a little bit, but I will be live next Friday with In a Nutshell, wrapping up a banger of a month in February with a nice little special surprise on that stream about a book I read in private that no one knows except for like Tom Orange for some reason. Well, Murphy knows too, so it's like Murphy and Tom Orange. But you'll have to come and check out the stream to see. It will be a really good time as always. So, folks, I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for checking this out. If you like, you can hit like. If you dislike it, you can hit dislike. And if you love to think about subscribing, I'd love to have you around. Patreon and description is optional, but always appreciated. Until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.